Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. We bring you hundreds of novel audiobooks covering every genre and every kind of story you can imagine. Action? We've got it. Adventure? Absolutely. Horror? Of course. Whether it's the legendary Uchiha massacre or outrageous tales like stealing Naruto's and Sasuke's women, you'll find it here. From epic series like One Piece, Bleach, Fairy Tail, and Hunter x Hunter, to countless other adventures, our library has it all. Love novels but don't have time to read? No worries, just plug in your earbuds, sit back, and let the story take over. Good listening, and happy hearing. He let out a low chuckle, nodding slightly. A rare sight indeed. Assembling such an extravagant lineup. Kyosuke nodded in acknowledgement, his crimson eyes blazed with excitement, an emotion no one else in the battlefield could understand. Chapter 190, Watch as I smash your truth-seeking orb with my fist. Target the damaged parts of his armor. Ninjutsu squad, prepare. Fire. Nearly 100 water dragon bullets roared forward. Aside from the Susanoo-clad figure, the other 5 opponents had already withdrawn to a safer position. You will die here today. Tobirama declared, his eyes ablaze with fury. The seething hatred etched deep in his bones twisted his entire being. Then, he saw it. A circular shield suddenly materializing on Susanoo's left arm. The Yata mirror, though powerful, was limited in size and could not shield the entirety of the colossal, perfect Susanoo, which loomed nearly 100 meters tall. However, by continuously channeling chakra into it, the shield expanded into a semicircular energy barrier, its coverage freely adjustable to intercept incoming attacks. The barrage of water dragon bullets surged forward like a relentless tidal wave. With a direct assault trajectory, the Yata mirror was able to block most of them completely. Sheer numbers can overwhelm even the mightiest. Even the Ten-Tails would struggle against the relentless force of an entire ninja alliance. I'd best not take these hits head-on recklessly. While the Yata mirror could defend against the onslaught, the sheer force of impact still transmitted through, forcing Kyosuke to bear the brunt physically. Once or twice was manageable, but if this continued for too long, even he wouldn't emerge unscathed. If you don't want me hiding inside my Gundam mecha, fine. I'll come down and play instead. With a forceful stomp, he shattered the diamond-shaped chakra crystal beneath his feet, sending cracks spiraling outward. Then, without hesitation, he leaped from the towering, 100-meter-high Susanoo, plunging toward the battlefield below. Midair, his hands blurred through a rapid sequence of seals. He was preparing to deploy a flying thunder god barrier beneath him. Don't even think about it. Having already suffered from this technique once, Tobirama wasn't about to let history repeat itself. In a flash, he executed a flying thunder god slash, aiming to disrupt Kyosuke's hand seals. Kyosuke twisted his body midair, evading the strike. But instead of retreating, he lunged forward, seizing Tobirama's arm and pressing his palm firmly against his chest. Sealing technique, void restriction seal. If you don't want me using the flying thunder god, then you shouldn't use it either. Kyosuke's voice was calm, yet laced with menace. You piece of trash, die already. The exchange was as fast as a flash of lightning. Despite his best efforts, Tobirama found himself at a disadvantage. Yet, instead of frustration, a sinister glint of satisfaction flashed in his eyes. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed a kunai into the air. In the next instant, 3 figures materialized around them. Flying Thunder God? Kyosuke's gaze darted across the battlefield, instantly picking out the shadow clones lurking behind the 3 new arrivals, their presence betraying the true nature of Tobirama's strategy. I see. The main body serves as the anchor while the shadow clones use Flying Thunder God to execute the teleportation ambush. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. That little schemer. As cunning as ever. The 3 figures now surrounding him were none other than the elders of the Senju clan. Die, Kyosuke Uchiha. Senju Kiki's voice was as cold as ice. His overwhelming battle aura exploded forth as he charged, unleashing a devastating punch aimed directly at Kyosuke. You should feel honored to be surrounded and attacked by us, even in death. Senju Rikiya added, his tone dripping with disdain. Rikiya unsheathed his katana, a potent curse-infused energy coating the blade. It immediately reminded Kyosuke of someone. Senju Batsuma. The power behind the blade felt strikingly familiar. The last of the 3, Senju Takuji, seemed to be a man of few words, but his attack spoke volumes. His taijutsu was brutal, showcasing strength that could rival the best of them. Having just left his Susanoo, Kyosuke couldn't summon it again immediately. He had to admit. Tobirama had chosen his moment well. But even so, this level of attack was far from enough to overcome him. A single horn sprouted from his forehead, and ethereal, pale green serpents coiled around him. Without hesitation, Kyosuke entered Sage mode. The 3 elders' attacks came swift, powerful, and flawlessly precise. However, the serpent shadows were an extension of Kyosuke's own being. Not only could they unleash senjutsu techniques, but they also served as an additional layer of defense against the close-range onslaught. 2 fists and a katana met the serpents. Intercepted effortlessly. The remaining serpents opened their mouths, unleashing flames so intense they seemed capable of turning everything to ash in their path. Sage art, scorching flames of grief. The 3 elders relied on their shadow clones to narrowly escape the attack's reach. But Kyosuke paid them no mind. His real target was above. Obirama, who was temporarily unable to counterattack. That little bastard harbored an unquenchable hatred for the Uchiha. There would be no reconciliation with him. Rather than dealing with his schemes in the future, it would be better to eliminate him now. A spectral snake shot toward Obirama. Reacting swiftly, Obirama unleashed a massive surge of water from his mouth, attempting to force the distance between them. With precision, he quickly formed another hand seal. Chakra surged, creating a spiraling water vortex. Countless torrents merged, condensing into a massive water dragon. Water-style, water dragon biting explosion. As the dragon clamped its jaws around its target, Obirama was struck by the serpents in retaliation. His body had yet to recover from his previous injuries. Unable to withstand the assault, his wounds reopened. Fresh blood sprayed through the air. His old scars split apart once more. Obirama's face turned deathly pale. He lacked even the strength to steady himself midair. In this 6-on-1 battle, the mastermind behind the ambush, Senjutsu Obirama, was the first to fall. Boom. Kyosuke was slammed into the ground by the water dragon. The immense force sent waves of water crashing in every direction, causing devastating secondary damage. Yet, neither the dragon's bite nor the raging currents had managed to touch him. Dujutsu, end. As Kyosuke emerged unharmed from the wreckage, the 5 remaining Kage-level powerhouses felt their hearts sink. They realized this battle would not be easily won. A shinobi truly lives up to his legendary name. Today, I have witnessed it firsthand. Sarutobi Sasuke remarked. Though his words carried admiration, his hands moved without hesitation. A blast of flames erupted from his mouth, splitting into multiple streams that surged toward Kyosuke from the front, left, and right. Fire-style, fire dragon flame bullet. The fire dragons were chakra-infused, their power so immense they could reduce an enemy to ash in an instant. Their accuracy was precise, making them incredibly difficult to evade. That is, unless the target was as unnervingly fast as Kyosuke. With the sharp insight of his Sharingan and the explosive speed of his teleportation jutsu, Kyosuke dodged effortlessly, weaving through the flames with ease. These 5 possess Kage-level strength. Defeating them would grant at least 100,000 points. If I failed to take them all down, it would be an insult to my years of effort. The thought flashed through Kyosuke's mind, his determination hardening. I'll kill one first and exchange for the advanced sage body. With that thought, black truth-seeking orbs erupted around him, forming a protective barrier. In the next instant, several powerful ninjutsu attacks rocketed toward him. Unleashed by the 3 Senju elders, who still kept their watchful eyes fixed on him. Keep a close eye on his movements. Don't let him. Senju Kiki instinctively began to issue orders. Before he could finish, Kyosuke appeared, completely unharmed, wielding a strange, yet unmistakable staff. And he was heading straight for the one who stood apart from the rest. Shimura Kazuya. Let's see how strong you really are. Faced with Kyosuke's direct approach, Shimura Kazuya showed no hesitation. His eyes glinted with arrogance as he threw a punch, fully confident in his own strength. Confident enough to pit his bare fists against a truth-seeking orb. Even Might Guy, when unlocking the 8 inner gates, had never dared to strike the orb directly. But Kazuya thought he could shatter it with his bare hand? Thinking back to his descendant, Kyosuke couldn't help but see the resemblance. The reckless streak that ran deep within the Shimura bloodline. It was no surprise that Denzo Shimura had later dared to stab Sasuke Susanoo with a kunai. A foolish, bold arrogance. In an instant, before the eyes of everyone watching, Shimura Kazuya's arm was torn away as if it had never existed. Then, his chest erupted into a cloud of blood mist under the power of Kyosuke's sage staff. Chapter 191, Exchanging for the Advanced Sage Body, System Notification, successfully killed Shimura Kazuya. Earned 18,000 points, current points, 106,750, Clan Leader Kazuya. Sarutobi Sasuke's eyes flashed red, his previously relaxed demeanor vanishing entirely. He had never imagined that, despite being surrounded by 6 Kage-level opponents of incredible strength, the target not only managed to kill one but also severely injured another in such a short time. What baffled him even more was the latter. He still couldn't understand how the powerful leader of the Shimura clan had fallen so suddenly. That black sphere, which appeared and vanished so abruptly. What exactly was it? Everyone, be careful. Do not touch that strange black substance. Sarutobi Sasuke loudly warned the others. On the other side, taking advantage of everyone's hesitation and reluctance to act rashly, Kyosuke swiftly accessed his system menu, locating the option he had been searching for. System notification, successfully exchanged for advanced sage body. Consumed 100,000 points, you bastard. Today, you will have no place to bury your body. Having had a close relationship with the Shimura clan, Sarutobi Sasuke found it utterly unacceptable that his friend had perished. Seeing the enemy stand motionless, head lowered, Sasuke bit his finger and slammed his hand onto the ground. Come forth, Monkey King, Inma. A young Monkey King materialized, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings before landing on the lifeless body before him. Sasuke, isn't this enough? Sarutobi Sasuke interrupted coldly, his face twisted with rage. Hurry and transform. No matter what, we must settle this today. Very well. Inma nodded, forming a quick seal with his hands. Transformation, adamantine staff. Boom. As Kyosuke watched with a hint of speechlessness, Sarutobi Sasuke transformed into a makeshift version of the great sage, Heaven's Equal, wielding an enormous staff and striking a threatening pose before him. This is absolutely ridiculous. Feeling his body undergoing an astonishing transformation, Kyosuke silently drew his Kusanagi sword, preparing to claim the 4 remaining heads before him. The points he had earned from killing Shimura Kazuya had not been particularly satisfying, so he hoped the remaining 4 would prove to be more rewarding. Perhaps he was the only one in the world who, even while surrounded and outnumbered, could still be dissatisfied with his opponent's strength. At this moment, everyone's attention was focused on Sarutobi Sasuke. His extravagant display made it clear that he placed immense confidence in his summoned beast's power. Very well. Since he was taking the lead, they would let him direct the attack. Gentlemen. Sarutobi Sasuke said, halting his playful manipulation of the staff. He planted one end firmly on the ground and gripped it with a single hand. His voice rang out with authority. The adamantine staff transformed by Inma possesses unparalleled power and will not be overpowered by that blade in his hands. I will suppress him in close combat. Leave the supporting attacks on you. The adamantine staff was of exceptional quality. Even the mighty Nine Tails had been forced back several dozen meters when struck directly by it. In Sasuke's eyes, no matter how talented Kyosuke Uchiha might be, he was still young. Even with the Sharingan, there was no way he could withstand the combined assault from both him and Inma. As long as they overwhelmed him in close combat, the others would have more than enough time to prepare their finishing moves. Sasuke reminded himself once more, no matter what, they could not allow this wretched man to escape today. Seeing Sasuke's absolute confidence, Senju Kiki gave a firm nod, solemnly promising. Rest assured, clan leader Sarutobi. We will handle the supporting attacks. The 2 invited clan leaders had already suffered an unexpected loss. One was dead, and the other was grievously wounded. The relationships between the 3 clans would undoubtedly be affected by this turn of events. They could not afford to let the battle drag on, risking further casualties. If they did, the Senju clan would have a difficult time justifying the incident to the outside world. Watch me. Sarutobi Sasuke gripped the staff at his waist and took a deep breath, his expression serious as he shouted. Extend. Adamantine staff. At the same time, the 3 elders of the Senju clan readied themselves. Should Kyosuke show even the slightest sign of struggle, they would unleash devastating ninjutsu without hesitation. The adamantine staff shot forward, extending at a rapid pace, reaching Kyosuke in the blink of an eye. Bang! The blade of his Kusanagi sword met the staff's tip with a clash, and an immense force surged through the point of impact. Had this been before, he would have been forced to retreat in order to disperse the overwhelming strength behind the attack. However, now, though his outward appearance remained unchanged, his body had undergone an earth-shattering transformation. His body trembled slightly. Once, twice, then thrice. And then, with a quiet defiance, he bore the attack head-on, standing his ground without so much as a step backward, completely defying everyone's expectations. In that moment, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield. Though no words were spoken, Sarutobi Sasuke could feel the weight of countless eyes fixed on him. Impossible. He muttered under his breath, unwilling to accept what he was witnessing. He retracted the adamantine staff and launched another thrust forward. Opposite him, Kyosuke, still immersed in the sensation of his newfound power, welcomed the strike without hesitation. This time, he didn't even tremble. So this is the power of the advanced sage body. Without even glancing at the retracting staff, Kyosuke raised his sword and lightly drew it across his own arm. The razor-sharp Kusanagi blade sliced effortlessly through his flesh, carving a long, deep wound. Before anyone could react in shock, they watched in stunned disbelief as the wound healed completely within mere seconds. Not just strength. My regeneration has advanced to a terrifying degree as well. Not just strength. Even my regeneration has advanced by several levels. Unless my heart or brain is directly destroyed, nothing can disable me in battle anymore. With such an astounding healing factor, I can finally engage in multi-shadow clone training without restraint. Physical strength, Super Kage, mid-tier. Spiritual strength, Super Kage, mid-tier. Chakra reserves, Super Kage, high-tier. Though Kyosuke had yet to fully integrate the enhancements of the sage body, his fundamental abilities had already skyrocketed. Given a few more years, he was confident his power would reach even greater heights. By then, he would have fully absorbed and perfected every ounce of strength granted by this body. With a high-tier Super Kage level Chakra reserve, I'm practically a humanoid nine tails now. Kyosuke clenched his fist, a twisted grin spreading across his face as excitement surged within him. At that moment, the air around him crackled with the sound of countless figures cutting through the atmosphere. In an instant, Kyosuke found himself surrounded by a sea of Senju clan shinobi. Looking around at the assembled forces, he calmly asked. So, from the looks of it, you've erased all my flying thunder god markers. That's right. Relieved that someone had finally broken the silence, Sarutobi Sasuke quickly responded. From the moment you stepped onto this battlefield, your retreat was already cut off. Accept your fate. Enough talk. Senju Kiki snapped, his hand waving sharply through the air. In an instant, the surrounding shinobi launched an all-out assault. Without the ability to use space-time ninjutsu, Kyosuke had lost his greatest advantage. His unparalleled mobility. Even if he forced the summoning of a perfect Susanoo, it would only turn him into a massive target for large-scale jutsu. As Sarutobi Sasuke had said, from the moment Kyosuke had set foot in the Senju stronghold, his doom had already been sealed. No matter the cost, they would ensure he perished here today. Wow, so many people. Kyosuke scanned his surroundings with a look of calm disdain, not bothering to hide the amusement in his eyes. Without waiting for anyone to respond, he suddenly brought his fingers together in a seal. Perfect timing. I, too, enjoy ganging up on the weak. Multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu. Chapter 192, Unrivaled Beneath the Six Paths, 141 Above It Multiple Shadow Clone Technique. Boom. 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 The unique white smoke of the clone technique erupted, blanketing more than half of the entire camp in an instant. The Senju shinobis, poised to launch their assault, instinctively hesitated. Their eyes darted across the battlefield, exchanging uncertain glances as an inexplicable sense of unease gripped their hearts. And soon enough, their fears proved true. As the smoke dispersed, revealing the battlefield once more, what they saw left them momentarily frozen. An overwhelming army of shadow clones stood in formation, their numbers stretching far beyond the horizon. A rough estimate placed them at well over 1,000. More than twice the number of Senju shinobis present. A voice, dripping with mockery, echoed across the battlefield. What's wrong? Surely you wouldn't say I'm using numbers to bully the weak, would you? After all, you are the mighty Senju, aren't you? The Senju shinobi scanned their surroundings, yet none could pinpoint Kyosuke's true location amidst the vast sea of identical figures. No one knew who made the first move, but in the next instant, the battlefield exploded into chaos. A frenzied melee erupted between the two forces. Blades clashed, fists met flesh, and jutsu illuminated the darkening sky. Amidst the madness, Kyosuke's points panel continuously flashed with notifications, but he paid them no heed. Instead, a faint smile curved his lips. It's getting late. It's time for me to get serious. With that, he pressed his palms together in a hand seal. Instantly, the flow of natural energy in the surroundings became chaotic, drawn toward him in a violent, all-consuming surge. A single curved horn emerged from his forehead, a shadow of a serpent coiled behind him, and a blazing green aura ignited his form. Kyosuke had entered sage mode. Effortlessly, instantaneously. His newly enhanced physique made the transition seamless, no longer requiring the cumbersome process of gathering nature energy. Unlike before, he didn't even need to release his curse mark. Instead, he directly absorbed the natural energy from his surroundings, executing a feat that only Senju Hashirama had ever accomplished. No matter how many techniques he had mastered before, no matter how many times he had fought Hashirama in direct combat, he had never been able to surpass him. But now, the truth was clear. The combination of the advanced sage body and senjutsu chakra was simply too overwhelming. In terms of raw combat power, Kyosuke at this moment had already ascended to the absolute pinnacle of the Super Kage level. And if he revealed his trump card, he was even confident in achieving a 1-for-1 exchange against a Six Paths level opponent. Thus, the phrase unrivaled beneath the Six Paths, 1-for-1 above it became a perfect descriptor of his current strength. Kyosuke's gaze swept across the battlefield. He let out a deep chuckle, muttering to himself, with my shadow clones intervening, you lot won't be able to use your large-scale cooperative jutsu anymore, will you? His advanced sage body and Ruchi Cave Sage mode had already placed him above the strongest figures in the shinobi world. But one must not forget. His true power came from his Sharingan. The sage body not only enhanced his sage chakra transformation, but it also provided unparalleled nourishment for his Sharingan. At the mere stir of his will, a terrifying dark golden radiance erupted into the sky. A perfect Susanoo, towering at a staggering 200 meters, took form, its body cloaked in a faint green serpentine sage cloak. With the slightest movement, it caused the very earth to quake violently. How is this possible? He was still holding back his strength before? With this kind of power, even Hashirama might. The three elders of the Senju clan felt a rare flicker of doubt creep into their hearts. They understood all too well the monstrous might of a perfect Susanoo. That was precisely why they had prepared an entire battalion of elite Jonin-level shinobi to counter it. Their strategy had been straightforward. The moment Kyosuke revealed himself, they would bombard him with relentless ninjutsu attacks, overwhelming him before he could fully unleash his strength. But who could have predicted that their enemy would summon such an absurd number of shadow clones? Their large-scale cooperative jutsu, the key to their victory, was now rendered useless. Inside the diamond-shaped crystal on Susanoo's forehead, Kyosuke closed his eyes for a brief moment, quietly sensing the transformation of his power. My size has increased by dozens of meters. The overall substance feels much more refined than before. But alas, I'm still far too distant from the 1,000-meter Susanoo of Hagoromo and his son. The father-son duo of the Six Paths Sage. One standing as tall as the Great Buddha, the other rivaling the Ten Tails in its complete form. Were beings of terrifying, monstrous proportions. Even now, despite his immense power, Kyosuke was still far from reaching their level. If he wanted to break past this ceiling, there was only one possible path forward. The Rinnegan. But for now, against these enemies before him, his perfect Susanoo was more than sufficient. His golden Susanoo eyes locked onto the battlefield below. The three Senju elders hesitated, their bodies tense with indecision. Kyosuke sneered. Without hesitation, he drew his colossal sword and swung it down toward the most densely packed section of the battlefield. The moment the blade fell, boom! An unparalleled shockwave erupted. The earth split apart, torn asunder by the sheer force of the strike. A howling storm of destruction surged forward, annihilating everything in its path. Under the horrified gazes of countless onlookers, the sword strike carved through the battlefield, its force traveling thousands of meters before finally dissipating. A long, terrible silence followed. Damn it! Senju Kiki, the Great Elder, gritted his teeth, his fists clenched tight. He knew. They couldn't allow this to continue. Kyosuke had no need to worry about collateral damage. His clones would regenerate, his army was infinite. He simply attacked wherever the enemy was most concentrated. But the Senju forces? They couldn't afford to turn their attacks against their own ranks. The realization struck like a blade to the gut. Exchanging a single glance, the three Senju elders came to a silent, grim agreement. Tonight, it would be they who made the ultimate sacrifice. All together. We cannot let this Uchiha brat. Boom. Before they could even finish their words, the massive blade of Susanoo came crashing down upon them. Kyosuke scoffed, his voice laced with cold amusement. Humphrey, all that talk. Just for some measly points. Not even bothering to pause, he swung his blade again. Tonight, the butcher's blade had been drawn. And it would not sheath until an outcome was reached. Submit. Or die. There was no third option. Meanwhile, the battle between Hashirama and Madara continued fiercely. Hashirama. Madara. Terrifying shockwaves rippled outward as the two titans exchanged blows, locked in a deadlock from the very start. Madara showed no signs of distress. He had long grown accustomed to battling Hashirama. But his rival was growing increasingly anxious. With his exceptional sensory abilities, Hashirama had long detected Kyosuke's movements across the battlefield. He wanted, needed, to rush back and reinforce his clan. But Madara refused to let him leave. Madara, let's put our battle on hold for now. Hashirama tried to reason with him. Madara scoffed. Save your breath. Until we settle this once and for all, you're going nowhere. He wasn't a fool. He knew exactly where Kyosuke had gone. And the longer he delayed Hashirama here, the greater the destruction Kyosuke would bring upon the Senju. Perhaps, tonight would be the night the centuries-old conflict between their clans finally ended. Madara's Sharingan glowed ominously as he raised his blade once more. Let's continue, Hashirama. Seeing that reasoning had failed, Hashirama shifted tactics. He softened his gaze and tried a different approach. Sentimentality. Do you remember, Madara? He said quietly. The riverbank where we first met? The joy we felt back then? Hearing this, Madara's movements subtly slowed. Noticing his chance, Hashirama pressed on. Our dream is so close now, Madara. Why must we fight? Why not lay down our weapons and resolve this through negotiation? Madara's expression darkened. It's useless, Hashirama. He shook his head, his voice laced with something almost akin to regret. Negotiation won't solve anything. If we are to unite, one side must be defeated. His crimson gaze burned with conviction. That Kyosuke. He won't tolerate the Senju standing over him. You're wasting your breath. Hashirama's jaw tightened. Because deep down, he knew it was true. He just didn't want to face that reality. Like Kyosuke, he refused to let the Senju become the defeated clan. For to be defeated meant to lose their voice in the future village. It was an idea implanted in him by Tobirama. And no matter how much he resisted, he had accepted it. He didn't care about power himself, but as a clan leader, he had to consider his people. This won't do. I can't waste any more time here. With a clap of his hands, the earth trembled. A massive wooden dragon surged into the sky, its serpentine body twisting through the air like a force of nature. Hashirama leapt atop its head. Without another word, he turned away. Racing back toward the Senju's main camp. Madara sighed. A foolish choice. Shaking his head, he turned his gaze toward the distant plains, where another battalion of Senju forces awaited. If Hashirama left to reinforce the main battlefield, then who would protect them from him? A slow smirk spread across Madara's lips. Senju. Today is the day of your defeat. Chapter 193, Peace Talks. End of the Warring States period. The camp had been attacked, and the majority of the Senju forces had launched a full counterattack. Impatient and anxious, Hashirama led a large force of ninjas toward the camp. However, the farther he ran, the stronger his sense of unease grew. It was then that he realized. The vibrations from the distant battle had ceased some time ago. This could only mean one thing. The battle at the camp had already ended. Either Kyosuke had been repelled by their forces, or Hashirama-sama. Along the way, they encountered several wounded comrades, and the information they provided made everyone's hearts sink further. Before long, the Senju group arrived back at the camp at full speed. What awaited them was a scene of utter devastation. Flames raged across the battlefield, consuming the wreckage of their once mighty camp. The ground was soaked with blood, bodies piled like mountains, and the air was filled with the wails of their fallen comrades. In the midst of this hellscape, a single figure sat atop a broken wooden frame. Kyosuke Uchiha. The Kusanagi sword was planted firmly into the ground beside him, its blade still dripping with fresh blood. He was drinking sake leisurely, taking slow, unhurried sips. At his feet lay the corpses of the 3 Senju elders, their bodies already cold and lifeless. A heavy silence fell over the surviving Senju forces. The sheer brutality of the scene left them speechless. How is this possible? Someone finally muttered, their voice laced with despair. He was alone. How could he have killed so many of us? The 3 elders. Tobirama-sama. And even the heads of the Sarutobi and Shimura clans. No one could have withstood their combined strength. What are we supposed to do now? What should we do now? The air was thick with fear and hopelessness. Amidst it all, Hashirama stood in deep silence. His emotions were a storm of complexity. Anger, grief, doubt. No one could truly understand the turmoil within him at this moment. Then, as if oblivious to the tension, Kyosuke raised his sake bottle. Care to have a drink? He offered casually. Hashirama took a deep breath, suppressing his emotions, and signaled for his people to stay calm. Then, without hesitation, he strode forward and sat across from Kyosuke on the broken wooden frame. He met the other man's gaze. Tobirama. Is he still alive? He asked. Kyosuke took another sip of his drink before answering. He ran away. He said with a smirk, handing over a cup of sake. Then, as if recalling something particularly amusing, he added. And that Sarutobi Sasuke. So proud, so arrogant. Was the first to flee the moment the tide turned against him. A flicker of disappointment crossed his face. Of all his opponents, Sarutobi Sasuke had been the most formidable. If only he had managed to take him down. At least then, he would have earned more than 30,000 points. 112,660. With the conclusion of this battle, Kyosuke had instantly replenished the resources he had spent upgrading his advanced sage body. The 11,000 points he had gained were by far the highest single battle reward he had ever received. If the outcome hadn't been so different from his expectations, Kyosuke might have considered wiping out the entire Senju clan. But of course, that would have forced Hashirama to unleash his true several thousand hands jutsu. At that point, the situation would have gotten much more difficult to handle and he'd likely have lost his own life in the process. The true several thousand hands was a terrifying force. its offensive power reaching the level of the six paths. Even with all his strength, Kyosuke would have to tread carefully against it. 1,000-meter-tall giant Buddha, capable of leveling an entire battlefield in mere moments. Its attacks covering a range of over 10 kilometers. Once it was unleashed, there would be almost no escape. Unless one was willing to face it head-on. But given the current situation, a life-or-death struggle with Hashirama was unnecessary. After all, a far greater threat loomed on the horizon. Otsutsuki Ishiki. With power at the half-step divine fire level, Ishiki far surpassed the six paths. Even with all his trump cards, Kyosuke's chances in a one-on-one battle against him were slim at best. For that reason, he needed Hashirama. And he needed Madara. Which meant. Kyosuke smiled. Just surrender. He said, voice calm and assured. If the Senju clan announces their surrender, then your wish can be fulfilled. I guarantee that the Senju will not retaliate and will not target you specifically in the future. Upon hearing these words, Hashirama fell silent once more. He had expected his clan members to protest, to lash out in anger, to curse him, to reject the idea outright. But instead, it felt as though they had all lost their voices. Their mouths opened, yet no sound came out. A suffocating silence hung over the battlefield. If you disagree, then. Kyosuke gestured toward the fallen shinobi, his gaze sweeping over the wounded. All of these people will die. Today, the Senju clan will be completely erased from the shinobi world. The blatant threat left no room for Hashirama to retreat. The only reason Kyosuke had spared these people lives was to use them as leverage. If Hashirama refused, he would be actively choosing to sacrifice countless injured comrades. And with his personality, he could never make that choice. You. Hashirama was about to speak when the sound of rapid footsteps suddenly echoed from the distance. Both men turned at the same time. From the far end of the battlefield, Madara Uchiha appeared, leading a large force toward them. His sharp eyes immediately took in the scene. The bodies, the flames, the scattered Senju forces. Before landing on Hashirama and Kyosuke, seated together with drinks. He instantly understood. Madara lifted a hand, stopping his clan members before they could make a sound. Then, he walked forward alone, his steps steady and unhurried, before taking a seat beside them on the broken wooden frame. For a brief moment, as his gaze swept across the battlefield, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. He hadn't expected Kyosuke's achievements to be this overwhelming. He had almost wiped out the entire Senju clan by himself. Madara had rushed over thinking he might need to save him. But now, it seemed the Senju were the ones in need of saving. Surrender, Hashirama. You know Kyosuke's personality well. Madara's voice was calm, steady, resolute. With Izuna still alive, the bloodlust that once consumed him had dimmed. In the end, the Uchiha were the stronger side. Now that they controlled the situation, there was no need to be as cautious as before, fearing every little thing. Whether the Senju survived or were wiped out was now entirely up to them. Fairness? That only mattered when both sides were equal in strength. And right now, they weren't. Sigh. After a long, heavy pause, Hashirama let out a deep breath, as if a crushing weight had just been lifted from his shoulders. Without hesitation, he made a gesture behind him, sending a signaling code that conveyed his stance clearly. Surrender. A tense silence fell over the battlefield as the Senju clan members exchanged glances. Some bore expressions of fear, others of anger, but for most, a wave of relief washed over them. Then, as if in silent agreement, the weapons began to drop. The dull clang of swords and kunai hitting the ground filled the war-torn camp. Kyosuke's gaze swept over the scene, lingering on Hashirama's face, where relief softened his features, and on Madara, whose lips curled into a rare, almost imperceptible smile. Slowly, Kyosuke extended his right hand. The dream has been realized. Right here, right now. Hashirama exhaled, the weight of years of conflict lifting from his shoulders. Indeed. With that, he placed his hand over Kyosuke's, then flashed a wide, almost childlike grin at the two of them. Finally, we don't have to keep fighting. Madara rolled his eyes. Don't smile like that. It's creepy. Yet, despite his words, he placed his hand atop theirs. And in unison, the three leaders stood together, their voices ringing out with unwavering finality. The war is over. Oh. A deafening cheer erupted from both sides. Warriors who had once been locked in a cycle of vengeance now raised their arms in triumph. Some wept openly, others stood in solemn reflection, but in every heart, a shared sentiment took root. Hope. Hope for a future unshackled by endless bloodshed. Hope for families who would no longer lose their loved ones. Hope for a world where children would grow up without the echoes of war looming over them. And so, as the leaders had declared, the war was over. P.S. Thanks for your continuous support. The next volume. The Hidden Leaf Village. Will begin soon. Chapter 194, The God of Shinobi. The war between the Uchiha and Senju had finally come to an end, and together, the two clans had accomplished the unthinkable. They had jointly established the first unified hidden village in the Land of Fire. The moment this news spread, it sent shockwaves rippling across the entire Shinobi world. Various factions scrambled to verify its authenticity, dispatching scouts and spies to uncover the truth. Yet, to their astonishment, the reports were not exaggerated. The impossible had become reality. Have they lost their minds? Many found it utterly incomprehensible. The Uchiha and Senju had been locked in a bitter blood feud for nearly 1,000 years, their enmity so deep that it seemed beyond reconciliation. What force, what unimaginable power, could have bridged such an insurmountable divide? Before long, the full details of the war's final battle began to emerge. At the heart of it stood one man. Kyosuke Uchiha. During the decisive clash between the two clans, he had single-handedly rewritten the fate of the battlefield, displaying power so overwhelming that left all who witnessed it in utter disbelief. 6 Kage-level powerhouses, each a pillar of strength in their own right, had joined forces to bring him down, supported by an elite force of nearly 500 battle-hardened shinobi. With such an overwhelming force converging upon a single man, was there any conceivable way for him to survive? Let alone triumph? And yet, by the time the battle reached its conclusion, the once formidable force lay in ruins. Of the 500 elite shinobi, over 200 lay dead, while the survivors bore wounds of varying severity. Among the 6 Kage-level shinobi, Senju Dobiramo barely managed to escape with grievous wounds. Sarutobi Sasuke, another renowned figure, survived only by sheer luck. As for the remaining 4, they perished at Kyosuke Uchiha's hands. For those who had not personally witnessed the battle, the accounts sounded like the ramblings of a madman. How could one man stand against nearly half of the Land of Fire's strongest warriors and emerge victorious? Yet the survivors swore by what they had seen. That day, Kyosuke Uchiha was no mere shinobi. He was like a god, a force of nature given form. Every movement he made carried an unstoppable momentum, his strikes infused with devastating power. His sheer presence on the battlefield struck terror into the hearts of those who dared oppose him. His dominance was not solely due to his Mangekyo Sharingan. His sheer resilience, blistering speed, and monstrous strength made him an unbreakable force. His ninjutsu mastery was unparalleled, his defenses impenetrable, his recovery rate astonishing, and his destructive potential utterly unmatched. What truly defied belief, however, was his command over all 5 chakra natures, an ability unheard of even among the most gifted shinobi. Especially at his age. With seamless mastery, he wove together advanced elemental combinations, a feat so rare and so deadly that it played a decisive role in the Senju's crushing defeat. His abilities were overwhelming in every regard. In the face of such absolute power, who could possibly stand against him? As whispers spread throughout the shinobi world, certain individuals began to bestow upon him a new title, the God of Shinobi. At the same time, the strength of Madara Uchiha and Senju Hashirama was also acknowledged throughout the shinobi world. People soon began to murmur that the Land of Fire was home to not just 1, but 3 shinobi of godlike power. And with such unparalleled figures uniting under one banner, the village they founded would be unlike anything the world had ever seen. To make matters even more compelling, the reputation of the Uchiha clan had undergone a remarkable transformation in recent years. This led many to ask themselves a fateful question. Should they move to the hidden village in the Land of Fire? And just as countless people were still contemplating this possibility, another unexpected announcement sent shockwaves across the entire country. The Uchiha and Senju were indeed forming a unified hidden village, and what's more, they had extended an open invitation to all residents of the Land of Fire. Furthermore, those who contributed to the village's construction would receive priority access to housing, employment, and educational resources. In simple terms, as long as one was willing to work for the village, they would receive its protection, regardless of their past and background. Even those who had once been enemies of the two clans, even those burdened with old grudges, would be welcomed. So long as they renounced their desire for revenge. If a blood feud spanning 1,000 years could be put to rest, then surely, there was no wound that time could not heal. The moment this news broke, it set off a storm across the entire Land of Fire. The larger clans remained cautious, preferring to observe from a distance before making their move. But the smaller and mid-sized clans wasted no time. Many uprooted their entire households, choosing to place their future in the hands of this emerging power. For common folk, the opportunity was even clearer. A place of stability, safety, and a future. Such things were priceless in an era defined by war and uncertainty. And in a world where strength dictated survival, was there any force more powerful than the combined might of the Uchiha and Senju? Even a child of 7 could answer, none. Thus, the choice became obvious. The movement began as a trickle, but soon, it swelled into an unstoppable tide. Across every road and trade route, caravans of all sizes could be seen, families carrying their entire lives on their backs, merchants and craftsmen seeking new beginnings, and rogue shinobi hoping for redemption. When asked a simple question, "Where are you headed?" the answer was always the same, to the hidden village. The land of safety and dreams. The sheer scale of the migration was unprecedented. Even Kyosuke himself wondered if the term unparalleled prosperity was enough to describe the scene. And of course, this entire recruitment campaign had been meticulously orchestrated by none other than Kyosuke Uchiha, the master of strategy and persuasion. After all, in the shinobi world, what was the most valuable resource? One word. Talented people. The establishment of Hidden Lee Village was happening 6 or 7 years ahead of its expected timeline. This meant they could use this additional time to absorb not only the Land of Fire's population but also civilians from the other 4 great nations. In the original timeline, many exceptional shinobi had emerged from humble, civilian backgrounds, rising to fame through their sheer talent. A strong civilian foundation would ensure Hidden Lee Village's dominance not just in warfare but also in economic strength. A crucial factor often overlooked in times of war. And once the time was right, they could wage campaigns against the other 4 great nations. Even with their unmatched power, the 3 gods alone could not conquer entire countries without a massive logistical force behind them. Because after all, what would stop the other nations from simply avoiding battle altogether? If occupation was the goal, their enemies could always retreat into the shadows, gathering resistance forces in secret. No matter how invincible they were in direct combat, they could not afford to be tied down in hostile territory forever. Thus, a strong foundation of lower-tier forces was necessary. Without it, any so-called invasion would amount to nothing more than a one-sided slaughter. Thanks to Kyosuke's foresight, Hidden Lee Village was growing at an astonishing rate. Every single day, the village welcomed dozens, sometimes even hundreds, of new residents. To further improve the clan's once feared image, Kyosuke entrusted Maya with a crucial task: personally overseeing the integration of new villagers. His instructions were clear. Make every new resident feel that the Uchiha were a warm and welcoming family. Meanwhile, Hashirama Senju paid little attention to such political maneuvers. Or rather, he was simply too exhausted to care. With the village's population exploding, what was the most immediate concern? The answer was simple: housing and food. With over 100 new arrivals every day, even shinobis alone could not keep up with the relentless demand for construction. Thus, the time had come for Hashirama, the great architectural expert, to take center stage. Working alongside Kaku, he constructed houses at an astonishing speed. One created the buildings, while the other used their dujutsu to modify them according to each family's needs. Together, they could achieve the work of 10,000 builders. A single lap around a village, and entire districts rose from the ground in an instant. With just 2 hours of effort each morning, they could provide enough homes for the newcomers. Without issue. The next challenge was food. And once again, this responsibility fell upon Hashirama. By channeling his immense life force, he could rapidly grow fruits and vegetables. Similar to how he summoned entire forests with his wood-style advent of a world of flowering trees. Thus, the once mighty Senju clan leader found himself building houses in the morning and tending crops in the afternoon. Occasionally, residents who had received farmland even sought him out, hoping he would use wood-style to enhance their fields and increase their harvests. With all this work, how could Hashirama possibly have the time to worry about politics? But while he remained distracted, there was one person who most certainly was paying attention. Senju Tobirama, the younger Senju brother. A master of strategy and politics. How could he fail to see the cunning scheme Kyosuke was weaving? Kyosuke was working tirelessly to elevate the Uchiha's reputation, and if left unchecked, they would become the dominant force within the village. So Tobirama made up his mind. He would not let Kyosuke have his way. If Kyosuke put up banners to welcome new villagers, Tobirama put up his own. If Kyosuke provided food and water, the Senju clan matched their efforts without hesitation. Whatever Kyosuke built, Tobirama made sure the Senju did it too. And if possible, did it better. Because as long as it frustrated Kyosuke, Tobirama was more than happy to do it. Chapter 195, The Stubborn Senju. Hashirama on the future Hokage Rock. 3 figures stood side by side, their clothing billowing in the bleak, cold wind. I say, haven't we posed long enough? Hashirama sighed helplessly. He still had a great deal of work to do. In truth, Kyosuke remarked, his words carrying an air of deeper meaning. Our greatest role is simply to stand here and be seen. Madara nodded in agreement. Their presence alone, standing as a symbol for the entire land of fire to witness, was a declaration of the village's strength. Without such a grand display, would Hidden Leaf Village have reached its current state of prosperity? Glancing at Kyosuke, who seemed momentarily lost in thought, Madara unexpectedly offered a word of praise. I have to admit, your proposal was excellent. Hearing this, Hashirama quickly nodded, inwardly acknowledging his friend's capabilities. When they first built the village, he had never imagined it would flourish as it had. Looking down from their vantage point, they could see the bustling activity within the village walls. Smoke curling from chimneys, streets filled with people moving about their daily lives. The sheer liveliness of it all brought tears to Hashirama's eyes. The dream he had chased for so many years, the vision he had longed for, was finally within reach. Receiving the praise of his two friends, Kyosuke merely shook his head with a faint smile. This alone is far from enough. He said. If we want the village to achieve lasting peace and stability, military strength alone won't suffice. Economic development must keep pace. He extended his hands, tracing a few circles in the air as he spoke. I plan to implement a land reform system, dividing the village into 3 major zones. First is the core district. The land here must remain under our control. Villagers can purchase temporary rights to their homes, but not the land itself. Next is the inner district, where housing prices will be more affordable, allowing people from different social classes to settle and integrate. Finally, the outer district. This should be expanded as much as possible. In simple terms, we build as much as we can, stretching the village to its full potential. Hashirama scratched his head in confusion. Why do we need to do all this? Having spent his whole life in a clan-based society, he couldn't quite grasp the purpose of such measures. Kyosuke took a deep breath before suddenly posing a question neither of them expected. Do you know the meaning of life? Seeing their silent expressions, he continued. Actually, it's not just you. I believe most people struggle to find the answer. In that case, let me give them one. For example, moving into a better home, relocating to a more comfortable district, finding a more respectable job, and so on. When people have clear goals, they will feel that their efforts are worthwhile. Even if, in the end, all they achieve is. Kyosuke trailed off, leaving his sentence unfinished. But the other two understood his implication. Patting Hashirama on the shoulder, he smiled. I've already drawn up the plans. I'll leave the implementation to you. Though he still didn't fully grasp the reasoning, Hashirama clenched his fist, his bright smile reflecting his determination. Meanwhile, Madara asked with curiosity. So, do you intend to increase tax revenue through housing and land? Of course not. Kyosuke shook his head before elaborating on his vision. In the beginning, many people simply won't have the means to afford land or housing rights. So, I've decided to introduce mortgage loans under the village's name. The concept was simple. Allowing villagers to borrow against their future earnings to purchase property they otherwise couldn't afford. With no upfront costs or immediate financial risks, the village would generate a steady stream of revenue over time. Even if the plan didn't lead to full-scale expansion, it would still serve as a crucial financial foundation for Hidden Leaf Village. Beyond that, Kyosuke also planned to support merchants and establish a trade route connecting the entire Land of Fire. After all, a hidden village, despite its power, was relatively small compared to the vast world of commoners. In the grand scheme of things, the Shinobi realm was merely a fraction of the Land of Fire's true scale. Take the Land of Fire, for example. Its vast territory was dotted with numerous towns and cities, many of which rivaled Hidden Leaf Village in size. To establish relations with these settlements, the first step was diplomacy. And that meant dealing with a secular ruler. The daimyo. With the daimyo's support, Hidden Leaf Village's economy could truly flourish. Many of these ideas were somewhat difficult for Madara and Hashirama to fully grasp. In fact, much of Kyosuke's reasoning remained hazy to them. To Madara especially, the concept of negotiating with the daimyo felt absurd. His first instinct was simple. Eliminate him and take direct control of the Land of Fire's military and government. Unfortunately, Kyosuke had vetoed that idea outright. What a joke. Even if they had twice the manpower of their two clans combined, it still wouldn't be enough. Even in later years, when Hidden Leaf Village reached its peak, it barely had enough capable administrators. Governing an entire nation wasn't just about strength. It was a complex endeavor with countless challenges. A single misstep could lead to catastrophe. Then there was the issue of security. With so many people guarding just Hidden Leaf Village, the village still repeatedly faced threats of destruction. If they stretched their forces thin by attempting to govern an entire Land of Fire, by the time they realized what was happening, they might already be wiped out. Rather than wasting resources on direct rule, it was far wiser to let the daimyo handle mundane affairs while Hidden Leaf Village focused on securing its own interests. Of course, Kyosuke had no intention of letting a daimyo rule over him indefinitely. It wasn't about not wanting to govern. He simply understood the importance of timing. When the right opportunity arose, they would naturally replace the daimyo. For now, the village's development remained the top priority. With economic plans in place, the next focus was education and military affairs. Though they seemed separate, the two were closely intertwined. Only by establishing a comprehensive education system could the village continuously produce talented individuals. The original Hidden Leaf Village Ninja Academy had the right idea, but in Kyosuke's eyes, its scale was far too limited. Each generation only had a handful of students. Far too few to sustain a large-scale war effort. Thus, Kyosuke proposed a bold reform: completely remove all entry restrictions for students, making enrollment numbers the primary concern. No discrimination by birth. No concern for talent. No tuition fees. As long as someone wished to become a ninja, they would have the chance. Furthermore, he planned to reshape public perception. They needed to erase the belief that becoming a ninja meant a lifetime of war and death. Instead, they would promote the benefits: stability, honor, and financial security. Upon hearing Kyosuke's vision, Madara immediately voiced his approval, but Hashirama hesitated. Kyosuke. His voice was serious. We founded this village to prevent children from going to war. Are you sure you're not straying from our original purpose? Moreover, strengthening our military too much could place great pressure on neighboring nations, which wouldn't be good for peace in the shinobi world. Kyosuke was stunned. He looked at his friend in disbelief, genuinely curious about how his mind worked. Avoiding military expansion. Out of fear of intimidating other nations? He tried to explain his reasoning, but Hashirama remained firm in his beliefs. At that moment, Kyosuke finally understood the struggles of that sixth Hokage from the future. Hashirama was brilliant in many ways. But he was also painfully idealistic. The man had even distributed the tailed beasts to other villages. What kind of idiot would do something like that? Sure, Hashirama had the power to subdue them. But did he really think everyone else could do the same? Those very tailed beasts, once given away, inevitably turned against Hidden Leaf Village in the end. Even Obirama himself, his own brother, met his death at the hands of the Kinkaku and Ginkaku brothers, who wielded the power of the Nine Tails. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that many of Hidden Leaf Village's future calamities stemmed from the foolish ideals of the Senju brothers. Chapter 196, Tobirama. Watch me call for reinforcements. In the end, the three of them failed to reach a unified agreement regarding military development. This conversation served as an undeniable wake-up call for Kyosuke, a stark reminder that he still lacked the highest authority within the village. If he wished to implement reforms, he had only one path forward: to seize the seat of ultimate power. Only by becoming Hokage could he guide the village onto the most righteous path. Otherwise, the same tragedies of his past life would inevitably unfold once more. What was truly intriguing, however, was that Senju Hashirama harbored a similar sentiment. Obirama. That night, Hashirama spoke with his younger brother about the discussion from earlier. I feel that Kyosuke's ideas are too radical. Hashirama said, his voice tinged with helplessness. Why can't he understand that if we grow too powerful, the other nations will inevitably grow wary of us? And when that happens, it won't just be a village conflict. It will escalate into a war between entire nations. It was evident that Hashirama was the kind of person who was utterly devoted to his own ideals. He firmly believed that as long as people could achieve mutual understanding, war would not be necessary. That all disputes could be resolved peacefully. Yet, the irony was that, from beginning to end, he had never once considered the situation from the opposing side's perspective. Kyosuke had repeatedly and explicitly laid out the consequences of lacking deterrence, but no matter how many times he explained it, this blockhead simply refused to listen. A man so utterly fixated on his own ideals, preaching endlessly about the importance of mutual understanding. But perhaps, deep in his subconscious, only those who accepted his version of peace were deemed to be in the right. And was that not, in its own way, a form of selfishness? Obirama observed his elder brother's troubled expression, hesitating for a brief moment before swallowing the words that had nearly left his lips. Words that would have revealed that he, too, agreed with that man's philosophy. But such words would never escape his mouth. No matter what, he would never allow the Uchiha to seize control of the village. Previously, he had worried that his elder brother would be unwilling to compete for authority against his friend. But now, those worries had completely dissipated. What kind of conflicts are the most terrifying in this world? Not those driven by mere survival. Not those fueled by hatred. Not even those fought over food and resources. None of these compared to the true horror. Ideological conflicts. A battle of ideals left no room for retreat. Everyone believed they were right, and it was precisely because of this conviction that they would stop at nothing to fight for their cause. To prevent Kyosuke from bringing ruin upon the village, Hashirama would inevitably take part in the struggle in earnest. And that, in turn, would give Tobirama the opportunity to maneuver from the shadows, gradually forcing the Uchiha to the edge of the precipice. After all, killing a person did not always require the use of a blade. At present, Kyosuke, Hashirama, and Madara each held a share of authority over the village. And without a doubt, the Senju were at a distinct disadvantage. To break this deadlock, they needed to restructure the power distribution among the village's leadership. Tobirama's thoughts were simple. Since they were forming a unified hidden village, then surely it could not be run by just their two clans. If other clans were to join, should they not be granted their rightful positions as well? And when that happened, the entire power structure would naturally shift. Tobirama had entertained such notions ever since the village's founding. And now, it was time to set those plans into motion. Just you wait, you wretched Uchiha. He thought with absolute confidence. He had once been a ruler in his own right. Until he crossed paths with Kyosuke Uchiha. And yet, he seemed to have forgotten one crucial truth. In every encounter between them thus far, he had never once gained the upper hand. Uchiha Clan District, Kyosuke's residence. This is so boring. Little Haruto lay sprawled out on the floor in a starfish-like shape, visibly displeased with how his father was constantly busy. When he first arrived in the village, he had been brimming with excitement. But after spending days surrounded by nothing but ongoing construction, his enthusiasm had all but disappeared. Glancing at his little sister, Nagisa, who was sound asleep in her cradle, Haruto's eyes flickered with mischief. Quietly, he slipped over to the window, nimbly climbed out, and slipped past the walls of the compound. Hey, time for an adventure. Like a little shadow, he darted into the bustling streets and disappeared from sight. He had already explored every corner of the village to the point of boredom. Now that he had finally managed to sneak out of the house, there was no way he would settle for merely wandering the village again. From what he had heard, his father had gone to war when he was 7 years old. So surely, it was perfectly reasonable for Haruto Uchiha to leave the village at 5, wasn't it? Before long, the little troublemaker had reached the main entrance of the hidden village. Just as he was about to blend into the crowd and slip outside, he suddenly felt someone grab him by the collar. Startled, he twisted around, only to see Aunt Maya looking at him with an amused yet knowing smile. Hey. Hello, Aunt Maya. Puffing up his chubby cheeks, he flashed his signature innocent look, hoping to win her over. Alas, Maya was not so easily fooled. One glance at his sneaky behavior was enough to tell her exactly what had happened. He had obviously snuck out of the house. If the adults found out, he would undoubtedly be in for a spanking. Gazing at the little rascal's sheepish grin, Maya couldn't help but chuckle and shake her head. She decided to let him off this time. Otherwise, he might stop letting her hold him in the future. Pulling the mischievous child into her arms, her expression suddenly grew somber. Years of battle had left her body riddled with injuries, making it unlikely that she would ever be able to have children of her own. It might not have been entirely appropriate to think this way, but Maya had indeed come to see the two little ones as her own. And Haruto, in turn, was quite attached to her, having grown up with her by his side. His father was strict. His mother was even stricter. Only this aunt of his truly spoiled him. Tugging at her sleeve, Haruto rocked his chubby cheeks from side to side, his voice tinged with pleading. Let me stay here, okay? I'll help you welcome the villagers. Fine. But you mustn't cause any trouble. Unable to resist his request, Mai reluctantly agreed. However, when Haruto wasn't looking, she discreetly signaled to one of the guards. The shinobi gave a small nod and instantly disappeared from the gate. Regardless of anything else, she had to inform Lady Mido. That was her duty as a subordinate. Completely unaware of this exchange, little Haruto had already wriggled free from her embrace and was enthusiastically standing guard at the entrance. If he couldn't leave the village, then playing a role-playing game seemed like a decent alternative. Mister, let me help you carry that. Oh? You're from Tensaku Street? I heard there are lots of fun things there. Don't worry, big sister. I'll protect you all in the future. As he darted around the gate, Haruto quickly became a delightful spectacle. At first, Maya had been worried. But as she watched the villagers respond to him with warmth and laughter, she had a sudden realization. Perhaps the presence of children could foster a greater sense of trust among newcomers to the village. After all, for weary travelers who had endured countless hardships on their journey here, what would they rather be greeted by? A line of grim-faced shinobi brimming with killing intent? Or the sight of a child laughing and playing at the gate? Maya believed that, for most people, the answer was obvious. If children could play freely at the entrance, it was a sign that the village was safe and peaceful. And that, in turn, would naturally put the newcomers at ease. La la la, humming cheerfully to himself, Haruto scampered about. until he suddenly collided with the carriage of a large incoming group. Where did this brat come from? A shinobi clad in unfamiliar attire shot Haruto an irritated glare. And the moment his gaze fell upon the Uchiha fan symbol on the boy's back, his expression darkened. Without hesitation, he lashed out with a kick. Out of my way, you little pest. Chapter 197, If you don't court death, you won't die. The man's kick did not carry much force. It seemed that he understood well. He couldn't cause a fatality. Otherwise, the Uchiha would have the perfect excuse to retaliate against them. But whenever he thought of their clan leader's tragic death, the fury in his heart refused to be suppressed. Killing was out of the question, but giving this little brat a kick should be fine, right? At worst, he could later brush it off as a defensive reaction against a sneak attack. After all, someone stationed at the village gate to receive guests was, at best, just some guard's child. A noble clan like the Shimura was not something a mere nobody could afford to provoke. Yet, unexpectedly, this young boy, who appeared no older than a child, moved with surprising agility. Yet, unexpectedly, this young boy, who appeared no older than a child, moved with surprising agility. The moment the man's foot lashed out, Haruto's body reacted instinctively. Before he could think, his body moved on its own. He ducked low and rolled swiftly along the ground, narrowly avoiding the Chunin's sudden attack. Unfortunately, he was too focused on dodging and did not pay attention to his surroundings, accidentally rolling straight into a roadside puddle. By the time he scrambled back to his feet, the wool sweater his mother had painstakingly woven was already soaked with dirty water and mud. Reaching out with his small hands, he tugged at his soaked collar, his tiny fingers curling around the muddied fabric. His face scrunched in frustration before he snapped his head up, puffing out his cheeks. Hey! Why did you kick me? He actually dodged it. Shimura Takehiko was no fool. From the boy's reaction alone, he could tell. This was no ordinary child. If any random 4 or 5-year-old could evade his kick, then the Uchiha would have conquered the entire shinobi world long ago. Seeing that the man refused to answer, Haruto's little face turned red with frustration. He wanted to strike back, but he wasn't sure if he could win. After a moment of thought, he could only sulkily pull the pendant from his neck and hurl it forcefully to the ground. There was only one move left in his arsenal. His strongest jutsu. Summoning, Father. As the pendant shattered, spilling a quicksilver-like liquid that spread across the ground, automatically forming a space-time barrier. In the span of a single second, Kyosukemen emerged from the teleportation array. P.S. Pokemon reference. For a brief moment, Kyosuke was taken aback to find himself at the village's main gate. He had been expecting to come face to face with his dear acquaintance, Black Zetsu. But judging from the current scene, things weren't quite as he had imagined. Father. Haruto lowered his head, his small hands clenching tightly onto his soiled sweater as teardrops pattered onto the ground, breaking apart into tiny fragments. He hadn't been trying to cause trouble. Even though he had been playing, he had genuinely found joy in helping people. But he couldn't understand it. He had only accidentally bumped into a carriage. He hadn't even hit a person. So why had that adult attacked him? The injustice of it all overwhelmed him and weighed heavily on his young heart, causing his tears to pour down in streams. Tears streaked down his cheeks, mixing with the grime on his face. With his small frame trembling and his muddied clothes clinging to him, he looked utterly pitiful. My lord. Sensing that something was amiss, Maya rushed forward, dropping to one knee. Please forgive this subordinate's failure in supervision, which allowed a scoundrel to take advantage of the situation. We beg for your pardon. My lord. A great number of Uchiha shinobi followed suit, all kneeling in unison. In an instant, the village gate fell into a heavy silence, save for the sound of Haruto's soft sobbing. He is Kyosuke Uchiha's child. At that moment, Shimura Takehiko wished the ground would swallow him whole. Before they had set out, the newly appointed clan leader had repeatedly warned them. Under no circumstances were they to provoke the god of shinobi. If they sought revenge, they had to be patient and wait for the right time. After all, if they could endure and bide their time, their chance for vengeance would surely come. But who could have predicted that before even setting foot inside the village, he would go and kick that man's son? Wasn't this just outright asking for trouble? Kyosuke-sama. Takehiko opened his mouth, his eyes darting around frantically, hoping that his clan leader would step in to speak for him. But the curtain of the leader's carriage remained completely still. The message was clear. You caused this mess, you deal with it. There was no way the clan would sacrifice itself just to protect one subordinate. I. Cold sweat drenched Takehiko's forehead. Kyosuke had not even glanced at him, yet the pressure weighing down on him grew heavier and heavier. Not to mention the kneeling Uchiha shinobi. Each one radiating murderous intent, the majority of which was directed at him. If he failed to handle this properly, It wouldn't just be his own life on the line. He might very well drag the entire Shimura clan down with him. At that moment, a lone figure suddenly appeared atop the village's outer wall. It was none other than Senju Tobirama. Having personally invited the Sarutobi and Shimura clans to join, it was his duty as host to greet them himself. However, the scene unfolding below made him stop in his tracks. These fools! Tobirama was so furious he nearly cursed out loud. Of all people to provoke, they had to pick that walking calamity. Kyosuke had already been looking for an excuse to deal with them, and now they had conveniently delivered themselves right to his doorstep. Publicly attacking the god of Shinobi's child. This was nothing short of a direct challenge to the village itself. If Kyosuke wanted to escalate things, he had every justification to immediately declare war on their two clans. And if that happened, all the allies Tobirama had painstakingly gathered would be utterly useless. He wanted to step in and mediate, but he knew very well Kyosuke would not show him any face. They can only pray for mercy now. That was all Tobirama could do. Pray. Meanwhile, Takehiko seemed to have made up his mind. He reached into his pouch, pulled out a kunai, and without hesitation, stabbed it deep into his own thigh. Seeing that the Uchiha remained unmoved, he let out a bitter laugh, gathered his chakra, and forcibly severed the very leg he had used to kick the child. Blood gushed forth, even making little Haruto forget his tears for a moment. At last, Kyosuke finally turned around. He reached down and personally helped Maya to her feet. He did not blame his subordinates. The reason he had allowed them to remain kneeling was simply to make a statement. My men are kneeling here. As for you, you brought this upon yourself. Deal with it. And if I'm not satisfied, then you can all stay right here. Having just spent the last of his points after a recent exchange, Kyosuke saw no issue with using this moment to eliminate both clans entirely. After offering a reassuring glance to his guilt-ridden clansmen, Kyosuke turned to his son. His right eye shifted into the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. With a mere glance, his Dujutsu activated, and the dirt and grime covering Eugen's clothes instantly flowed back into the earth. Eh? Blinking in surprise, Haruto looked up at his father, eyes wide. Let's go. Time to head home. Your mother is worried about you. Sweeping the child up in his arms, Kyosuke turned and disappeared beyond the village gates. Only then did the suffocating tension finally ease. Thank the heavens. A shinobi from the Shimura clan let out a long, quiet sigh. Once, their clan had been a noble and powerful household within the Land of Fire. Now, they have been reduced to mere shadows, living under the mercy of others. How utterly pathetic. Fortunately, Senju Tobirama appeared in time and relieved everyone's worries. As for Shimura Takehiko, who was still bleeding profusely, everyone knew this man would not live much longer. Perhaps, sometime in the near future, he would be found hanged in his room. An offering to appease the Uchiha's wrath. They had come expecting an alliance with the Senju to suppress the Uchiha. Who would have thought that before even stepping through the gate, they would be given such a harsh welcome? What a complete disaster. Chapter 198, Enduring humiliation does not mean you can forge ahead. You've all been frightened. Tobirama expressed his concern, though his tone carried not a shred of sincerity. In truth, he was eagerly waiting for Kyosuke to end the fool's life right then and there. A man like that, if allowed entry into the village, would only bring endless trouble. Originally, he had intended to wait until things settled down before recruiting a few disciples from the Sarutobi and Shimura clans, thereby tying them firmly to the Senju's cause. But now, it seemed he would have to put that plan on hold. His gaze fell upon the newly appointed Shimura patriarch, who stood meek and submissive before him. Seeing the man's pitiful display, Tobirama's irritation gradually subsided. After a brief moment of contemplation, he finally spoke. For the time being, proceed with utmost caution. Keep a low profile in all your actions. Prepare a generous gift and send it to the Uchiha. When the time is right, your place in the village's decision-making body will naturally be secured. In that case, we are most grateful to Lord Tobirama. The Shimura clan leader lowered his head even further, his voice filled with humility. Both he and Sarutobi Sasuke understood a simple truth. The future of the Land of Fire belonged to this hidden village. They had only two choices, submission or opposition. There was no third path. Fleeing the Land of Fire? That was a coward's way out. Something only those secret ninja arts clans would consider. How could they so easily abandon their ancestral homeland? Besides, other nations would soon follow suit, establishing hidden villages of their own. No matter where they fled, they would still be subject to governance and exploitation. Given these circumstances, staying was the only viable option. At least here, under the rule of the Senju and Uchiha. Two of the strongest noble clans. They could find some measure of security. And if wars broke out between nations in the future, They firmly believed that no other country would be able to stand against them. Before long, the group arrived at the luxurious residential district that Hashirama had specially prepared for them. "You may settle in here. I still need to go and receive the Saratobi Patriarch." Suddenly, Tobirama's expression changed drastically. The change was so abrupt that the others instinctively turned toward him in confusion. Before they could ask, he abruptly spun around, his gaze locking onto a figure approaching from behind. A woman, dressed in casual attire, was walking toward them at a steady, deliberate pace. "Lady Mido." Tobirama hesitated, as if wanting to speak but ultimately holding back. "This is none of your concern. Step aside." Mido's voice was crisp and commanding. Her gaze swept over the crowd, pausing the moment she spotted the injured man lying on the stretcher. In an instant, 9 gleaming adamantine chains shot into the air, slicing through the space between them with unstoppable force. Without sparing Tobirama a single glance, the chains passed through the gathered shinobi and wrapped around the wounded man, lifting him into the air. "You dare lay a hand on my child? Are you declaring war on the Uzumaki clan?" Having spent so much time at Kyosuke's side, the bun-haired princess had learned well how to wave a big flag. The truth of the matter was irrelevant. Her priority was to take the offensive first. By pinning a heavy accusation on the other party from the start, she turned what might have been an unreasonable action into something entirely justified. This tactic was incredibly effective in escalating conflicts. Before the accused could even process the situation, the argument had already shifted, and the weight of the charge forced them into a defensive position. By the time anyone realized what had happened, everything would already be settled. And now, with a single phrase, "You are making an enemy of the Uzumaki." Mido has escalated the situation to an entirely different level. In truth, the siblings Haruto and Nagiza were technically royalty, a prince and princess of the land of whirlpools. So her words weren't even an exaggeration. Tobirama clenched his jaw. He knew that Uzumaki Ashina had once spoken to his elder brother, making one thing explicitly clear: no matter what happened between the clans, they must never harm Mido's good children. Because of that, he could not say much at this moment. "Damn it, Kyosuke Uchiha, you really are a menace," he thought bitterly. Frustrated and helpless, Tobirama could only shift his anger toward Kyosuke. The matter had already been settled. So why had his wife suddenly stepped in to make things worse? Who was next? Kaku Uchiha. If they pushed any further, the entire Shimura clan might as well slit their own throats and be done with it. Just as Tobirama was thinking this, a blood-curdling scream tore through the air. A crimson mist sprayed outward. The man's other leg had vanished without a trace. The overwhelming agony was too much. His body convulsed once before collapsing into unconsciousness. Tobirama exhaled slowly, thinking that perhaps, finally, this ordeal was over. But he had underestimated a mother's protective instincts. Before anyone could react, the 9 adamantine chains cut through the air, spreading out like a vast, glistening web over the Shimura clan. The ominous chains loomed menacingly over their heads. Fear rippled through the group. Seeing their companion's mutilated state, the remaining Shimura shinobi instinctively stepped back, terrified of becoming the next victim. "Lady Mido, what is the meaning of this?" The Shimura clan leader's expression finally darkened. They had already been pushed this far. If they backed down any further, they would lose all standing in this village. Mido tilted her head slightly. "The meaning?" Her voice was light, almost casual. And yet, the chain slithered closer. The slight tightening was enough to send a suffocating pressure through the air. The Shimura leader clenched his fists. An invisible weight pressed down on his shoulders. Mido's gaze was sharp and unyielding. "I will give you one warning. Stay away from my child. From this day forward, wherever my family is present, no member of the Shimura clan is to appear within 100 meters. Otherwise..." Her lips curled into a small smile. "I will kill every last one I find." Swish. 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 As soon as she finished speaking, countless figures materialized in the surrounding area. Some leaned against walls, others crouched on rooftops. Their presence eerily silent yet suffocatingly oppressive. Their sharp, otherworldly eyes gleamed ominously in the dim light, leaving no doubt about their identity. Uchiha. The Shimura clan collectively lost their voices. A wave of panic spread among them. "If you still don't understand." The adamantine chains coiled around the injured man's throat without a sound. Surrounded by countless pairs of blood-red eyes, brimming with cold, unrestrained killing intent, the Shimura clan leader dared not move a muscle. "Then perhaps," Mido continued, her voice soft yet merciless, "the Shimura clan should find itself a new leader." With those words, the chains abruptly tightened. Veins bulged across the man's forehead as his body convulsed involuntarily. Even so, he resisted the urge to fight back, knowing that doing so would mean certain death. Thud. After a few agonizing seconds, the nearly suffocated Shimura patriarch collapsed onto the ground, his breath coming in ragged, humiliating gasps. Mito didn't spare him a second glance. With a slight nod toward Tobirama, she turned and walked away, ignoring the others as if they didn't exist. She was the princess of the land of whirlpools. The wife of Kyosuke Uchiha, the god of shinobi. And today, she had made sure everyone knew it. In the past, few had given her true status much thought. But after today, none would dare to ignore it. That was exactly the outcome she had wanted. Her family was her final bottom line. Any force that dared cross it would face her full wrath. In truth, she had considered killing the man outright. If she didn't spill blood, she feared others might mistake her mercy for weakness. But before she left home, Kyosuke had given her specific instructions. If the Shimura resisted, they were to be slaughtered without hesitation. But if they chose humiliation over death, then let them live. Because Senju Tobirama was a suspicious man by nature. And a man who harbored deep resentment yet chose to endure. Was a dangerous pawn Tobirama would never allow to remain. There was no need for Mito or Kyosuke to do anything. The Shimura patriarch's days were already numbered. This will do. Suppressing the last traces of lingering bloodlust, Mito shifted her thoughts to something far more important. I heard a new food street opened in the south. Let's eat out tonight, and with that, the ever-lazy princess conveniently avoided her cooking duties for the day. Back in the courtyard, Tobirama exhaled lightly. Rest well. We'll speak again tomorrow. Tobirama said with a calm tone, even going so far as to console the shaken members of the Shimura clan. The Shimura clan leader felt touched by his kindness. He failed to notice the cold, dangerous glint in Tobirama's half-lowered gaze. A truly patient man you are, Lord Shimura. A fleeting trace of killing intent flickered in his eyes. Chapter 199, Young Hiruzen. Tobirama takes a disciple. A few weeks later, a piece of news arrived. The head of the Shimura clan had suddenly fallen ill, and it was clear that his condition was grave. It seemed he did not have long to live. For the sake of the clan's development, a previously unknown young man ascended to the position of clan leader, vowing to restore the Shimura clan's prestige and contribute his exceptional abilities to the construction of the village. In response, the Senju brothers greatly praised him, and the two clans, seemingly unified in purpose, even posed for a commemorative photo together during the inauguration ceremony of a new clan leader. As for the sudden illness of the former clan leader, which ultimately led to his death, who would pay it any attention? Despite the turmoil surrounding the change in leadership, the Shimura clan gradually settled into their new role within the village, becoming involved in various affairs and matters of importance. All that remained was the arrival of the Sarutobi clan. Once they arrived, the Senju brothers would finally be in a position to shift the balance of power, using both the Shimura and Sarutobi clans to counter the growing influence of the Uchiha. In the central region of the Land of Fire, a convoy of carriages made its way along the main road. Clan leader. A shinobi responsible for intelligence handed Sarutobi Sasuke an encrypted letter. Thank you for your hard work. Sasuke appeared very kind, his attitude gentle even toward his direct subordinates. He opened the encrypted letter and carefully read the information inside. After a long pause, he slowly shook his hand, and the letter immediately burst into flames. The Uchiha, huh? Saying these words, he couldn't help but recall the events of that day, remembering the godlike power of that formidable figure. He couldn't understand how the Shimura clan had dared to provoke the world-renowned god of shinobis. Now, they have lost not only their dignity but the life of their clan leader as well. Senju. Seeing his father's face grow heavy with concern, a young boy around 5 or 6 years old could not help but ask. Father, what happened? Startled, Sasuke snapped back to reality and smiled softly at his son. Hiruzen. He began, his voice warm. Once we reach our destination, I'll find you a good teacher. All right? The young boy was none other than the young head of the Sarutobi clan, the future third Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village, Sarutobi Hiruzen. A teacher? Hiruzen blinked, confused. Why? With you teaching me, isn't that enough? Ha ha ha. Hearing his son's praise, Sasuke laughed heartily, then after a pause, explained. That person is much stronger than me. More importantly, he will one day rise to the pinnacle of power. I see. Hiruzen nodded, as though he understood. Seeing his son's mature response, Sasuke smiled with satisfaction. His son was exceptionally talented, and even more impressive was his deep understanding of political intricacies at such a young age. Not wanting to repeat the Shimura clan's mistakes, sending his son out to learn from others was the attitude Sarutobi wanted to convey to the outside world. Given the current political situation, it seemed highly likely that Senju Tobirama would ascend as the second Hokage. When that day came, with his son's many talents, Sasuke had no doubt that Hiruzen would inherit the position of third Hokage. And when that time arrived, the entire village, and perhaps even the entire land of fire, would fall under the control of the Sarutobi clan. Endure humiliation? Bear heavy burdens? No, the truly wise person is the one who makes others unable to see his wisdom. Glancing at his son's small, soft feet, Sasuke suddenly smiled and asked, Hiruzen, do you know why people's feet are usually whiter than their faces and hands? Why? Hiruzen asked, intrigued. Because they're always hidden. A few days later, the Sarutobi clan arrived at the unnamed United Hidden Village. From a great distance, Sasuke, along with his son, dismounted from the carriage and adopted a very humble stance. Welcome, welcome. Hashirama, who had finally found time in his schedule, personally came to greet them at the village entrance. This was also something his younger brother had specifically requested, who believed that in order to win hearts, even if it was just a show, Hashirama needed to demonstrate his down-to-earth, approachable nature. Of course, Hashirama's personality was naturally this way, so he didn't need to feign anything, sparing Tobirama the trouble of forcing a pretense. Because of this, Tobirama believed the leadership of the village should be entrusted to his elder brother. This, he thought, was the right thing to do, with no selfish motives. Whether others believed it or not, Tobirama himself was convinced. Come, Hiruzen, greet the two gentlemen. Sasuke said with a smile, guiding his son forward. At his father's prompt, Hiruzen obediently stepped forward, bowed, and cheerfully greeted. Greetings, Lord Hashirama, Lord Tobirama. So this is your son? Hashirama asked curiously. I heard he's already proficient in 2 types of nature transformation techniques at just 5 years old. Is that true? Yes. Sasuke nodded, exchanging a knowing glance with his son. Understanding the cue, Hiruzen walked over to an open patch of ground and skillfully demonstrated basic fire style and earth style techniques. Impressive. Tobirama remarked lightly, though his expression remained as impassive as ever, making it impossible to gauge what he truly thought. At that moment, Hashirama seemed to remember something and turned to his younger brother, asking. By the way, I heard that you've recently taken on a disciple? Yes. Tobirama responded with a nod. He's the child of the former Shimura clan leader. His talent is truly impressive. In that case, Hashirama suggested with a smile. Why don't you take this boy in as a disciple as well? He hadn't thought much about it, simply going with his instincts, but after seeing Hiruzen's remarkable talent, he couldn't help but be impressed. Upon hearing his elder brother's suggestion, Tobirama's eyes flickered slightly, a rare shift in his expression. Would you be willing to become my disciple? He asked the young boy, his gaze sharp as he studied him closely, trying to gauge his character. In return, Hiruzen only looked back with the usual childlike confusion, unsure of the question. I would. Hiruzen replied hesitantly. Seeing this, Hashirama immediately burst out laughing, clearly delighted to see his younger brother gain such an excellent disciple. It was only then that Tobirama belatedly realized what had just transpired. With a half-smile, he glanced at Sarutobi Sasuke, nodded, and implicitly acknowledged the teacher-disciple bond. It seems this Sarutobi clan leader knows how to recognize the right moment. The plans I had prepared can now be set aside. As his thoughts shifted, Tobirama adjusted his mindset and began to exhibit the warmth characteristic of the Senju. The two sides engaged in friendly conversation, discussing the glorious histories of their respective clans. The atmosphere grew harmonious, filled with mutual respect. On behalf of the village, I officially welcome the Sarutobi clan's joining. Hashirama announced, marking the Sarutobi clan's integration into the ranks of the Hidden Village. First the Shimura, and now the Sarutobi. There was no denying that the recent moves of the Senju had caused quite a stir. Unaware of the full extent of the situation, the villagers began to sense that perhaps the Senju weren't as harsh as the rumors suggested. Our village is growing stronger. One of the informers, previously planted, began to spread the word among the villagers. Yes, so many great clans have joined. Now no one dares to threaten our safety. Another villager chimed in, eager to add his voice to the discussion. Before long, a wave of excitement spread through the crowd, filled with praise for the Senju and Hashirama. Seeing the growing enthusiasm among the villagers, Tobirama couldn't help but smile. But before his smile could fully spread, he noticed a large group of Uchiha clan members swiftly arrived at the village entrance. At their head stood none other than the long-absent god of shinobi. This is quite the commotion, Kyosuke remarked, his eyes scanning the scene with a knowing smile. Chapter 200, Kyosuke's version of the Will of Fire clan leader Sarutobi. It has been a long time. Apart from Hashirama, everyone present wore grim expressions. There was no doubt that today's events were a blatant show of strength by the Senju. In such matters, it was usually a case of each party doing what they could, competing with their own means to see who would have the last laugh. But what was the purpose of bringing so many people here? If not a deliberate provocation, then what? Especially for Sarutobi Sasuke, who was currently feeling a deep sense of unease. After all, he had been one of the key participants in the grand slaughter back then. Now, with the Senju having forged alliances and bound their fates to their newfound comrades, he, Sarutobi Sasuke, had suddenly been cast as the villain in the eyes of many. Was this not simply taking advantage of honest men? He, Sarutobi Sasuke, could not accept such injustice. It has been a long time, Lord Kyosuke, Sasuke said, bowing deeply, his attitude proper and respectful. At the very least, this ensured that the other party had no obvious faults to pick on. Whether or not Senju Tobirama would look down on him for this, he did not care in the slightest. As long as his son was treated well, that was all that mattered. Kyosuke gazed at the man who was so adept at maintaining appearances, then suddenly let out a faint smile. His next words were sharp and direct, cutting through all pretense like a blade. Since you have already withdrawn, why trouble yourself by stepping into these murky waters today? It was almost an outright accusation. Calling the Sarutobi leader a deserter who had abandoned his allies in battle, pointing out his cowardice for all to see. Though I may not be the most capable, I am still willing to contribute to the land of fire. Our shared homeland. Sarutobi replied smoothly, his expression calm, as if he had not heard the underlying mockery at all, twisting the words into something favorable in his own mind. Such a response was beyond belief. Even Tobirama, who was known for his suspicion and sharp judgment, could not help but let a fleeting look of disdain pass through his eyes. During that battle, when they had surrounded the enemy, the Sarutobi leader had initially put on the appearance of standing his ground, only to flee at the first sign of trouble while the others remained locked in combat. To call him a coward was not an insult, it was simply the truth. But in a way, this was not necessarily a bad thing. A man like this, who prioritized self-preservation over loyalty, was someone Tobirama could manipulate with ease. Sensing the shift in atmosphere, Hashirama quickly changed the topic. Kyosuke, are you heading out on a mission? No. Kyosuke replied. Just like all of you, I have come to welcome our future comrades. He deliberately placed emphasis on the word comrades, making his mockery all the more apparent. Welcoming comrades? Tobirama frowned slightly, momentarily puzzled. But before he could ask for clarification, both Hashirama and Kyosuke turned their heads toward the distance. A few seconds later, he, too, sensed something and followed their gazes. In the distance, a convoy of carts was making its way toward the village gates, its scale no smaller than that of the Sarutobi clan. The banners on the vehicles clearly revealed the identity of those arriving. The Fuma clan. And at the forefront of the procession stood none other than Fuma Yukishi, a man who had once clashed with Kyosuke. During the confrontation with the Hidden Moon Village clan, this very man had turned on his former allies in the heat of battle, dealing a devastating blow to Otsutsuki Sujito. For his contributions to repelling the enemy, Fuma Yukishi certainly deserved recognition. With the arrival of the Sarutobi and Shimura clans, the Senju clan's prestige had grown immensely. Since that was the case, Kyosuke had taken it upon himself to extend an invitation to the Fuma clan as well. Now, with the formation of a hidden village in the Land of Fire becoming inevitable, no shinobi clan could afford to resist the tide of change. Even more so when Yukishi had already expressed interest in aligning himself with them. In the end, it was as if dry tinder had met a raging fire. The two sides quickly reached an agreement, forging an alliance that would stand in opposition to the ever-growing influence of the Senju. You must have had a long and tiring journey. At this moment, Kyosuke, though still exuding an air of dominance, seemed more adept at diplomacy than even the brothers Hashirama and Tobirama. Even the members of the Fuma clan in the background could not help but feel surprised. So the legendary god of shinobi was not as ruthless and savage as the rumors suggested. On the other side, Senju Tobirama's expression was far from pleasant. First, the grand show of strength he had painstakingly orchestrated had failed. Second, despite the large-scale movement of the Fuma clan, he had received no prior intelligence on the matter. Just imagining the implications of this oversight was enough to send chills down his spine. Everyone. Kyosuke spoke with a calm smile, stepping forward with an air of confidence that unsettled Tobirama. Let's not stand around. If there is anything to discuss, let us do so in the conference room. An hour later. Inside the conference room the meeting had commenced. The three great figures of the hidden village, Kyosuke, Madara, and Hashirama, were all present. Meanwhile, the other key decision-makers, including Tobirama, the Shimura clan leader, the Sarutobi clan leader, and the Fuma clan leader, had all taken their seats. These 7 individuals now formed the highest governing body of the hidden village. Now that we are all gathered. Kyosuke, acting as the host, began the meeting with a formal introduction of everyone present. With the brief formalities out of the way, he wasted no time getting to the main agenda. Today's meeting will focus on 3 primary matters. First, we must decide on an official name for our hidden village. One that carries symbolic meaning. Second, we need to establish a standardized uniform and forehead protector. A unified appearance will help foster a sense of cohesion among our shinobi. Third, we must discuss the establishment of a ninja academy. Seeing that no one objected, he tapped his fingers against the table and said, "Let us begin with the first topic. The name of our hidden village. Our village is located in the land of fire, so I hope that its name will reflect the everlasting nature of flames. Wherever leaves dance, the fire will burn. As long as there are those who inherit the will of those before them, the flames will never be extinguished. The shadow of the fire will illuminate the village and allow new leaves to sprout. Even when one flame fades, another will ignite, and the cycle will continue, unbroken, for generations to come. I propose that our hidden village be called Hidden Leaf Village. The village hidden in the leaves. As for the leader who guides everyone, he shall be known as the Fire Shadow." The Hokage. Madara and Hashirama exchanged glances, both feeling an inexplicable tremor in their hearts. Especially Hashirama, who felt that the name was incredibly fitting. He had not expected Kyosuke to have such poetic sensibilities. Even Obirama, who had always been skeptical of Kyosuke, could not help but cast a surprised look his way, silently contemplating something. As for the other 3 clan leaders, they knew their place well. Their role today was merely to observe. The decision regarding the village's name was a matter that only the 3 main figures could determine. Now that the god of shinobi had spoken, who among them would dare to oppose it? Did they have a death wish? Excellent. Not bad. Truly outstanding. The 3 clan leaders nodded in unison, their expressions perfectly neutral. Almost as if they were simply there to set the mood. If they could, they might have even shouted, "Kyosuke, you're amazing." Then it's decided. Hashirama looked around, and seeing no objections, he made the final call. Thus, the village hidden in the leaves, Hidden Leaf Village, was officially established, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the Land of Fire's history. Now, the next matter concerns the attire and forehead protectors of our shinobi. Kyosuke announced. Before Obirama could interject, he watched in stunned silence as Kyosuke calmly retrieved a set of design sketches he had evidently prepared in advance. Ignoring Obirama's expression, which resembled that of someone witnessing the impossible, Kyosuke smiled faintly and spoke. "Since our village is named Hidden Leaf Village, Hidden Leaf, it is only fitting that our forehead protector bear a simple yet powerful emblem, a single leaf. From this day forward, this emblem shall represent Hidden Leaf Village, standing as a beacon of love and peace. As for uniforms, I have also taken the liberty of preparing a design. A green flak jacket, which complements our village's name and identity, will serve as the standard attire. I am confident it will be well received by our shinobi." After finishing his explanation, Kyosuke turned his gaze toward the assembled leaders. "What are your thoughts?" "Excellent. Very fitting. A remarkable choice." The 3 clan heads, having already resigned themselves to the fact that their input held little sway, simply nodded in agreement. At this point, they had seamlessly settled into the role of background figures, ensuring the atmosphere remained harmonious. With the name of the village settled, matters such as forehead protectors and uniforms were mere details. The real focus now was the establishment of the Ninja Academy. Chapter 201, Ninja Techniques Can Be Changed at Will. The credit-based educational plan. The establishment of a Ninja Academy is a rather sensitive topic. For a family-run management system, it means they will lose a powerful tool for winning people's hearts. The academy would mean that people no longer have to rely on their family's gifts to complete their ninja training courses. In fact, they may even learn useful ninjutsu on their own. Over time, this would cause the ninja connection to their families to gradually weaken, while a stronger sense of belonging to Hidden Leaf Village would emerge in its place. This, in essence, is the real purpose behind the establishment of the Ninja Academy. On this matter, both Kyosuke and Obirama share a consistent viewpoint, and neither of them has tried to sabotage the other's position. This unity ensures that no one in Hidden Leaf Village can stop the establishment of the academy. As Kyosuke's gaze passed over the faces of the 3 clan heads, Obirama spoke solemnly. The establishment of the academy will significantly enhance the foundational strength of Hidden Leaf Village as ninjas. In the event of war, the ninjas trained in this academy will serve as a formidable shield to protect Hidden Leaf Village from foreign enemies. What do you all think? After a round of silent exchanges, the 3 clan heads gave their response as expected. Very well. Not bad. Excellent. However, this time, the 3 major clans couldn't be so easily pacified. Kyosuke patted Sasuke Saratobi on the shoulder, smiling as he said. You just said, very well, right? Maybe you should pretend I didn't say that. Sasuke muttered reluctantly. Good, thank you for your understanding, clan head Sarutobi. Kyosuke praised him lightly before redirecting the conversation to the matter of construction. As for the funding, there is no need to worry, the village will cover everything, but there are some matters that I still need your clan's help with. First, the personnel. Since it's an academy, the most important aspect is the faculty. I need you all to provide as much assistance as possible with this. And then there's the matter of ninjutsu. I've decided to implement a credit-based system for the courses. Credit-based system. The idea of a credit-based system was so novel that everyone, except for Kyosuke, was momentarily stunned. The old-school clan heads were all puzzled, but Kyosuke smiled and explained. It's quite simple. Based on the students' results, moral behavior, and efforts, there will be different reward systems. As long as they accumulate enough credits, they'll be able to exchange them for ninjutsu, starting from the basic transformation techniques, all the way up to S-rank, ultra-high difficulty jutsu. S-rank ninjutsu, too? The room fell into stunned silence as everyone exchanged looks. Fumayukishi even seemed as though he wanted to raise his hand to ask if he still met the admission requirements for such an academy. Kyosuke Dano. Shimura clan head said, frowning as he carefully voiced his concern. While this system can indeed boost strength, it could also lead to internal security issues. Rest assured, Shimura clan head. Kyosuke replied, having anticipated such concerns and already prepared a solution. We will hold weekly political and ideological classes to reinforce the students' sense of belonging to the village. Upon graduation, Jonin-level instructors will guide them, monitoring and assessing each student's growth, including their loyalty to the village. Ah, I see. The amount of information was overwhelming, and Shimura clan head took a moment to process. However, Fumayukishi interrupted from the side. Kyosuke Dano, finding enough Jonin-level instructors may be difficult, don't you think? It's simple. Kyosuke leaned forward, his voice growing more serious. Every Jonin registered in Hidden Leaf Village will be required to complete regular teaching assignments. Leaning forward with his arms crossed on the table, Kyosuke's tone grew even more serious. Let me remind you all, this is of utmost importance. The success or failure of the Ninja Academy will determine the prosperity of the village for the next century. Nothing less than full cooperation will suffice about this matter. He did not need to speak of the consequences. The gravity of the matter was clear to all present. No one was foolish enough to miss the village's stance on this. At this point, there was no room for negotiation. The decision had been made. We, the Shimura clan, have 8 Jonin available, and we will fully dedicate them to the construction of the Ninja Academy. We, the Fuma clan, have 9 Jonin, and we will provide every possible support to the Academy's establishment. We, the Sarutobi clan, have 18 Jonin, including myself. We will obey the village's orders in every regard. As soon as the words were spoken, everyone turned to look at the calm-faced Sarutobi Sasuke. Goodness, your clan has more Jonin than the Shimura and Fuma clans combined. It was no surprise that the Sarutobi clan, which had long been absent from the front lines of war, had such a strong reserve of power. Kyosuke, too, could not help but marvel. The quality of the ninjas from the Warring States period was truly remarkable. Under the immense pressure of constant survival, ninjas either died young or grew to become formidable combat masters. While their overall skills might not be on par with the later generations of Jonin, in terms of raw combat prowess, they were certainly above and beyond. Thank you all for your understanding. Kyosuke smiled and reassured them. During the teaching period, Jonin instructors will receive compensation based on their performance. We won't ask you to work without proper reward. At this moment, Madara Uchiha, who had remained silent thus far, suddenly spoke up. The Uchiha clan's Jonin will also participate in the construction of the Ninja Academy. Those with teaching abilities will serve as instructors, and the others will act as guiding Jonin, teaching students how to survive and eliminate enemies. Our clan will also contribute a total of 458 different ninjutsu techniques, covering all levels, which students can use for exchanges in the future. 458 different types of ninjutsu? Even Hashirama was stunned. The Uchiha clan actually has so many ninjutsu stored up. But after a moment of reflection, he understood. Since the Sharingan could copy ninjutsu, it all made sense. Seeing the excitement on everyone's faces, Kyosuke felt the time was right to speak up. However, the truly significant numbers are not within the clans, but among the common people. Considering the financial conditions of many, I've decided that the village will offer student loans to every ninja attending the academy. The term student loans was entirely unfamiliar to them. By now, the clan heads had become accustomed to such novel concepts and no longer interrupted. They simply waited for Kyosuke to elaborate. Just as the name suggests, the village will cover all the expenses during the students' studies. Once they graduate and start taking on missions under the guidance of their Jonin instructors, they will begin repaying their loans gradually. Gentlemen, I cannot bear to see commoner ninjas miss the path of ninjutsu due to financial burdens. It will be difficult at first, but I believe that the sacrifices we make today will bear rich fruit in the future. With that, Kyosuke pulled out a thick stack of savings banknotes. This is about 2 billion ryo in total, my personal donation to the student loan fund. Madara, Hashirama, and Tobirama each produced their own banknotes, contributing a total of approximately 400 million ryo combined. This still barely reached Kyosuke's personal contribution, which made up 1/5 of the total. After all, this god of shinobi had long since established lending institutions across the land of fire. With money making money, under the operations of his second secret ninja, his monthly profits were substantial. Of course, free education at the outset would leave a massive funding gap, and handing over 2 billion nearly emptied his own wallet. It would likely take 10 to 20 years to recoup his investment. With him alone, there was no way to shoulder all the costs. After all, the village's expenses weren't limited to the ninja academy. There were also scientific research teams, ninjutsu development teams, barrier squads, intelligence departments, and the construction of various facilities and entertainment spaces. It wasn't until Kyosuke took on this responsibility that he fully realized how expensive running a village could be. Looking at his current funds, he realized they were but a drop in the ocean. After much deliberation, the three clan heads finally agreed to contribute about 200 million ryo. Kyosuke stroked his chin thoughtfully, murmuring to himself, "I'll have to come up with a way to raise more money." Chapter 202, Time to start making money. Amidst laughter and joyous chatter, representatives from various clans stood together, each holding a golden shovel, tossing soil and laying the foundation for what would become the cornerstone of the Ninja Academy's construction. Those who had money contributed funds, those without money contributed labor, and those without either, well, they could only contribute their lives. In any case, the first high-level meeting of Hidden Leaf Village had come to a successful conclusion. However, many unresolved issues remained, the most pressing of which was the village's current financial shortfall. This era was vastly different from the peaceful and prosperous future. In the years to come, many parents living in security and comfort would be reluctant to let their children become shinobi. But for now, the people's mindset was far more pragmatic. Nothing was more reliable than power held in one's own hands. It was easy to predict that once the Ninja Academy was built, countless eager students would flock to it. When that time came, the village's financial reserves would face an unprecedented strain. Thus, not long after the meeting ended, Tobirama stopped Kyosuke just as he was about to leave. "I need to ask you. How exactly do you plan to solve the financial issue?" During the meeting, it was inconvenient to argue in front of the other clans. But now that the outsiders had left, these concerns had to be addressed. "Funding?" Kyosuke responded with a smile. "For the initial phase, the money we've gathered should be enough to last us a while." "Humphrey. And how long is a while? A year? 2 years? Don't be so hasty. We can use this time to think of other ways." "What ways?" "I'm not telling you." With an infuriatingly composed expression, Kyosuke turned and walked away, as if he had everything under control. Seeing this, Hashirama, who knew Kyosuke well, patted his younger brother's shoulder with a laugh. "Trust him. There's never been anything he wanted to do that he hasn't succeeded in." "I understand," Tobirama admitted with a frown. "But we can't let him steal all the spotlight." Sigh. "Let's talk about it later." Not wanting to be dragged into the discussion, Hashirama swiftly made his escape before Tobirama could change the topic again. Left standing there alone, Tobirama sighed in frustration. His elder brother was truly hopeless in these matters. The recent meeting had settled many key issues. The village's official name had been confirmed, 4 head protectors had been designated, and even the uniforms had a standardized design. Yet, the most critical matter remained untouched from beginning to end. Who would take on the title of Hokage? At present, the Uchiha clan held the greatest power. With both Madara and Kyosuke standing at the pinnacle of strength, they could easily crush the Senju. To counterbalance them, the Sarutobi and Shimura clans had been brought in. As more clans merged into the village, they would gradually gain greater influence over Hidden Leaf Village's decision-making body. At that point, who would be chosen as Hokage was still up in the air. This was Tobirama's plan. To use collective power to force the Uchiha into compromise. If they refused? Then there was a simple solution. Leave Hidden Leaf Village if they dared. Otherwise, they would have to accept the order established by everyone. The only problem was that, at present, no one had truly stepped into the highest echelons of power. Sarutobi Sasuke was still lacking, and the puppet-like leader of the Shimura clan was utterly useless. Only by securing a seat in the highest decision-making circle could they truly stand as equals against Madara and Kyosuke. As for the establishment of the Ninja Academy, Obirama was content to let the Uchiha handle it. He had no desire to personally oversee such matters. Instead, he planned to leave the village for a time, to seek out someone with the power to counterbalance the Uchiha. Surveying the entirety of the Land of Fire, only one force had the potential to intervene in the struggle between the two great clans. The Hyuga clan, which had been silently growing in strength in the east. 5 years ago, Hyuga Tenjin and Kyosuke had vanished at the same time. If Tobirama believed that was pure coincidence, he'd be lying to himself. With his eloquence and persuasion, Obirama was confident that he could convince Hyuga Yaoi to join their cause. When that time came, by any means necessary, he would ensure she entered the highest decision-making circle. Once that happened, Hidden Leaf Village would no longer be dictated by the Uchiha alone. And if push came to shove, if a final confrontation was inevitable, then with that woman's formidable Tenseigan, the Senju side would still stand a chance at victory. Just wait, evil Uchiha. Obirama murmured to himself. Hidden Leaf Village will ultimately belong to the Senju. After returning to the Uchiha compound, Madara immediately sought out Kyosuke, eager to hear how he planned to resolve the village's financial crisis. We can't just go rob other countries, can we? Madara remarked. But from the look in his eyes, he seemed more than a little tempted. Of course not. I'm a civilized man. Kyosuke replied with a smirk. Since Madara was one of his own, he had no reason to keep his plans a secret. I have 3 solutions to address the funding shortage. First, we work on drawing in more clans. Their contributions will help cover our short-term financial gap while simultaneously strengthening Hidden Leaf Village's overall power. Second, we establish direct communication with the daimyo of the Land of Fire. We make it clear to him. Hidden Leaf Village can serve as the blade in his hand, protecting both the country's territory and his personal safety. But in return, he must provide substantial support in both economic and public affairs. If he agrees, we can assign elite shinobi to act as his personal guards around the clock. I have no doubt that the daimyo will make the right choice. And the third. Hearing the first 2 proposals, Madara couldn't help but feel impressed. No wonder Kyosuke had managed to amass such vast financial resources. His foresight and strategic thinking were far beyond the average person. Just as Madara was getting engrossed in the conversation, Kyosuke suddenly stopped talking. Madara frowned. Why did you stop? I have a question for you. How's your control over the 9 tails? It's excellent. Madara replied without hesitation. There was none of his earlier reluctance. In fact, he now seemed quite satisfied with it. Exactly. The tailed beasts are incredibly useful. Kyosuke continued. Now, tell me. If you had known in advance what it meant to wield one, how much would you have been willing to pay to obtain it? I would have given everything. Madara admitted, his eyes narrowing as realization dawned. The pieces clicked together in his mind, and his expression shifted from admiration to outright disbelief. Wait. You're suggesting that we sell the 9 tails? He was utterly shocked. Wasn't that as good as giving up his own life? Stop spending so much time with Hashirama. I swear, your intelligence is declining at an alarming rate. After a moment of exasperation, Kyosuke finally revealed his true plan. Apart from the 9 tails, there are still 8 other tailed beasts in the world. We will capture them. Then sell them to other nations. Once they see what you've achieved with the 9 tails, any leader with a shred of intelligence will understand the true value of a Jinchuriki. And like you said, they'll be willing to pay any price. Selling tailed beasts. At first, Madara found the idea brilliant, but after a moment's thought, a flaw in the plan became apparent. Kyosuke, if we sell the tailed beasts, our enemies could one day use them against us. He voiced his concern. Ha! Kyosuke waved a hand dismissively. Who said that just because we sell something, it belongs to the buyer forever? If I happen to be traveling and am suddenly ambushed by a Jinchuriki, and in self-defense, I kill them and reseal their beast. Isn't that completely reasonable? Madara's brow twitched. Kyosuke continued, utterly unfazed. Even if they get angry, so what? Once they've witnessed the power of a tailed beast, no matter the cost, they'll always want to buy another. This isn't just a business. It's an endlessly profitable cycle. Madara stared at him in silence. There was only one thought in his mind. This guy was utterly shameless. Chapter 203, The Return of the Inoshikacho. The following day, Kyosuke personally led a team on a journey to meet with the daimyo and discuss matters of cooperation. Since he was the one who had brought up the topic, it was only fitting that he see it through himself. As for the newly established 12 Guardian Ninja, the first batch of members would be composed entirely of Uchiha. On the surface, their duty was to protect the daimyo, but in reality, Their true purpose was to prevent the Senju from secretly forging connections within the daimyo's court. At this stage, Senju Dobirama had yet to realize the significance of the daimyo. However, once the village was on the right track, he would eventually understand that economic power was the foundation of everything. When that time came, financial support from the daimyo's government would become indispensable. This was precisely why, in later generations, every Hokage candidate had to formally present themselves to the daimyo of the Land of Fire before taking office. It was not that Hidden Leaf Village lacked strength, but rather that no one could afford to bite the hand that fed them. Once a village became reliant on external resources, certain obligations could not be ignored. To ensure the Senju did not scheme in the shadows, Kyosuke intended to bring the daimyo entirely under his control. The elite guards were only part of the strategy. He also intended to infiltrate the daimyo's administration by placing his own people in key positions. This task would be handled by his top intelligence officer, the #1 secret ninja. At present, however, the most urgent matter was money. A colossal amount of funds was necessary to turn Kyosuke's grand vision into reality. If he sought to unify the shinobi world, sheer bloodshed alone would not suffice. True dominance was not achieved through force but through governance. By providing stability and prosperity for the people. Since he had came to this world, he would not allow it to be destroyed. The Otsutsuki were indeed the ultimate enemy, but no one could hope to challenge such an overwhelming force while the shinobi world remained divided. It would be foolish to fight external threats while internal conflicts raged on unchecked. Kyosuke sighed and shook his head, deciding to put such concerns aside for now. He turned to glance at the carriage behind him, where his mischievous son was jumping around with boundless energy. For this trip, he had deliberately brought his son along. Hidden Leaf Village was on the verge of establishing its first-ever ninja academy. As the one who had proposed the idea, Kyosuke had to set an example. His own child would be among the first to enroll. To ensure that his son would not become a target for bullying, Kyosuke had decided to start training Haruto in the ways of the ninja. If he did not start preparing him now, then his son's remarkable talent would be wasted. Enough jumping around. Start your training. Oh. Upon hearing his father's command, Haruto immediately leapt onto an open patch of ground, drew a small short sword, and began practicing his taijutsu forms. For a Genin-level ninja, taijutsu was the foundation of everything. Even those born with exceptional bloodline abilities could not afford to neglect the basics. A physically well-trained opponent could easily overwhelm an inexperienced genius. Kakashi Hatake was a prime example. Armed with nothing but his father's white fang short sword, he had carved a path all the way to the rank of Jonin. And then he had remained stuck at the Jonin level for over a decade. A once dazzling prodigy had gradually faded into mediocrity. Though his name remained well known, he no longer possessed the overwhelming dominance he once had over his peers. While part of the blame lay with the burden of his Sharingan, the absence of a true mentor had also played a significant role. Had Tsukumo Hatake survived, Kakashi's progress would have been far greater and far more rapid. Kyosuke would not allow his son to stagnate. During Haruto's time at the academy, his primary focus would be on mastering the Uchiha style sword art. Once his chakra reserves had grown and his Sharingan had awakened, he would shift his attention to ninjutsu mastery. Kyosuke had already tested his son's chakra affinity. The results had been astonishing. Haruto had inherited his father's talent perfectly. He possessed an affinity for all 7 chakra natures, giving him the potential to become a truly formidable shinobi. Although his individual chakra affinities were only at an average level, he could still use ninjutsu from any element without difficulty. This would save him an immense amount of time that would have otherwise been spent developing elemental chakra affinities. Once he had trained sufficiently, Haruto could begin integrating nature transformations into his sword techniques. At that point, his combat prowess would reach an entirely new level. Kyosuke refused to believe that his son could possibly lose to Hashirama's child. The two of them had married at nearly the same time, and their children had been born in the same year. Once they entered the academy, they would naturally be classmates. Since Kyosuke himself could overpower Hashirama, it was only natural that his son would not fall behind either. And if Haruto did lose, Kyosuke would not hesitate to make his childhood a living nightmare. Raise your arm higher. Put more strength into your strikes. Did your mother not feed you before we left? 5 minutes have passed. If you're done resting, then get back to training. Is this all you've got? How do you expect to protect your little sister in the future? All along the road to the daimyo's palace, Haruto's pitiful cries echoed through the air. At the borders of the Land of Fire, a small group of figures moved like shadows, slipping silently across the frontier. Phew. Looks like we made it through without issue, murmured a man with a distinctive top-knot hairstyle. This was Nara-shun, the leader of the operation. The once proud 3 great clans of the secret ninja art. Nara, Akimaki, and Yamanaka. had suffered a crushing defeat in the war against the Uchiha. With no other choice, they had been forced into exile. Now, in response to Senju Dobirama's invitation, they had returned to the Land of Fire, seeking a future within Hidden Leaf Village. Gazing into the depths of the silent forest ahead, Narashun's expression was heavy. He silently prayed for a safe passage. The road home would not be without danger. The clan leaders had long anticipated this. It was clear that Dobirama had not extended the invitation purely out of goodwill. While strengthening Hidden Leaf Village was undoubtedly a factor, it was highly likely that he also intended to use them as a counterbalance against the Uchiha. Even knowing they were being used as pawns, the Nara, Akimaki, and Yamanaka clans had no other choice. Life in exile had been just as harsh, if not worse, than what awaited them in Hidden Leaf Village. Rather than struggle endlessly for survival, it was better to take their chances in the village. After all, if there was one thing the Nara clan excelled at, it was strategy. As long as they could play their cards right, they feared no opponent. That was, if they could make it back alive. Time passed quickly. By noon, their group had ventured deep into the Land of Fire. Just as Narashun was beginning to relax, a band of rogue ninjas suddenly appeared before them, blocking their path. "Hand over your money and women, and we'll let you go," sneered one of the bandits. "A robbery?" Narashun frowned. Something felt off. Their group was clearly dressed in clan uniforms. It was obvious at a glance that they belonged to a noble shinobi lineage. Even rogue ninjas would hesitate to target such a group. It was simply not worth the risk. "Let's not be hasty. Perhaps we can talk this out," Narashun said, feigning submission while subtly signaling his clan members to prepare for battle. In an instant, several dark shadows shot forward, silently entangling the enemy before they could react. Ninja art, shadow strangle jutsu. In mere moments, over 20 rogue ninjas lay dead. Lifeless shadows of their former selves. Was I just overthinking it? Narashun murmured, shaking his head. Something still didn't feel right. Just as he turned to leave, the ground beneath them suddenly collapsed. A massive pit, several meters deep, had been waiting for them all along. And inside, countless explosive tags. Already ignited. "It's a trap." Boom. 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 Flames and debris engulfed the air. As the explosion consumed him, Narashun's final thought echoed in his mind. "I was cautious every step of the way. I even checked for traps before stopping. Where did that hole come from?" Chapter 204, Once I make my move, you shall be captured. The deafening roar of explosions continued to echo, persisting for a full 2 minutes before gradually dying down. Apart from a small handful of individuals, the rest of the 3 clan shinobi had been utterly annihilated, leaving not even ashes behind within the deep pit lined with countless explosive tags. "Help! Help me!" A man, his leg blown off in the blast, struggled desperately to crawl out of the raging inferno. He knew all too well that the enemy would never grant him mercy, yet the searing agony of the flames devouring his flesh left him no choice. Whatever fate awaited him next had to be better than the slow, excruciating death of being burned alive. Splash! Amidst his pained cries, a stream of water suddenly shot out from the side. Not particularly forceful, but just enough to extinguish the flames consuming his body. A faint mist rose from his charred flesh as he gasped in pain, struggling to lift his head. His vision blurred from the smoke and unbearable agony, but as he forced his eyes open, he found himself staring into a pair of chilling, scarlet red pupils. As expected of the Nara clan. A truly masterful diversion, the voice was melodious, yet dripping with cruel mockery. The last thing he would ever hear. A single blade pierced through his heart. With practiced precision, Kakuuchiha twisted her blade, then casually kicked the corpse aside, sending it tumbling back into the distant flames. Just a short while ago, the secret ninja number 1 had relayed crucial news. Senju had secretly reached out to the 3 great secret ninja art clans, the Nara, Yamanaka, and Akimaki. It was highly likely that this was an invitation for them to join Hidden Leaf Village. As for their true intentions behind this move, there was no need for speculation. Even a fool could see it. It was an open bid to prepare for an eventual confrontation with the Uchiha clan. The Sarutobi and Shimura clans could be ignored for now. Neither Kyosuke nor Kaku had taken them seriously to begin with. However, there was no way they would stand idly by and watch as the Senju strengthened their own forces. Thus, Kakuuchiha was dispatched. Laying an ambush along the only route these clans could take, she had everything prepared well in advance. With her ocular powers, she could create traps on the spot, leaving not a single soul aware of their impending doom until the moment of detonation. To guarantee absolute success, she had even prepared tens of thousands of explosive tags in advance. And yet, despite all her meticulous planning, she and the secret ninja number 1 had underestimated one man. Naruhigashihiko. That wretched man had foreseen the possibility of Uchiha intervention. This entire squad had been nothing but a sacrifice. A mere distraction, meant to draw attention away from the true main group. By exchanging a small contingent for the safe arrival of the three great clans in Hidden Leaf Village, the trade-off was more than worth it. Kaku clenched her jaw. What a miscalculation. She pulled off her mask, revealing a face that remained eerily calm and composed. Yet beneath that serene exterior, a fire of rage burned, scorching hot enough to incinerate everything in its wake. Ever since she had pledged her loyalty to Kyosuke, she had never once failed in carrying out his orders. No matter how big or small the task, she had always ensured perfection. And now, she had been outmaneuvered. By Naruto Higashihiko, of all people. This grudge will be repaid in full one day. Her voice, dripping with venomous hatred, faded into the wind. By the time the flames had settled, she was already gone. Hidden Leaf Village, the main gate. Welcome, welcome. Senju Hashirama himself had came to greet the arrivals, his expression warm and hospitable. Standing beside him were two prominent figures, the heads of the Sarutobi and Shimura clans. Though Hashirama never openly acknowledged it, the village had already been split into two factions. On one side stood the Uchiha, whose growing influence was further reinforced by their close ties with the Fuma clan. Their combined strength had become an undeniable force, impossible for anyone to ignore. On the other hand, while the Senju's individual power was comparatively weaker, they had secured the allegiance of 5 different clans. And with the arrival of the 3 great secret ninja art clans, their overall combat strength had taken a significant leap forward. Although an all-out conflict between the two sides remained unlikely, power still played a decisive role in many matters. Many thanks, clan leaders, said Nara Higashihiko, the designated spokesperson for the 3 secret ninja art clans. His role had always been to handle external affairs, and he carried himself with practiced grace. Yet, as he took in his surroundings, a nagging thought took root. Why was Senju Tobirama not here to greet them? Perhaps noticing his confusion, Hashirama smiled and gestured toward a certain direction. Tobirama went east. Hidden Leaf Village cannot be complete without a certain clan's presence. The east? Naru Higashihiko's pupils contracted sharply. A realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. There was only one clan in the entire Land of Fire that warranted such personal attention from the Senju leader himself. The very same clan that had once pushed the Senju to the brink of destruction. The Hyuga. Rumors had long swirled that the Hyuga's new head still possessed the legendary Tenseigan, surpassing even Tenjin in power. Many speculated that, aside from the 3 universally acknowledged strongest figures in the Land of Fire, the next most formidable warrior was none other than this woman. If I recall correctly, her name is Hyuga Yaoi. Hyuga clan, martial arts arena. In the sparring arena, 2 figures stood facing each other. Senju Tobirama, and Hyuga Yaoi. The man sighed wearily, rubbing his temples. Lady Hyuga, can we not resolve this through peaceful discussion? Discussion? Yaoi let out a sharp laugh, her voice laced with derision. Senju Tobirama, don't take me for a fool. Do you think I don't know exactly what you and your brother are planning? You want the Hyuga to act as your shield? Fine. Defeat me first, then we can talk. You misunderstand. Tobirama exhaled heavily, already feeling a headache forming. Why did this woman have to be so stubborn? Perhaps his decision to avoid marriage had been the right one after all. Hidden Leaf Village's unmarried faction +1. Truth be told, he had came to the Hyuga with genuine sincerity. He had no intention of using them as pawns. In fact, he wished to elevate the Hyuga to stand on equal footing with his brother. To create a counterbalance against the overwhelming power of the Uchiha duo. But no matter how he explained it, she simply refused to believe him. Tobirama felt truly wronged. Since when had his credibility sunk so low? Sure, he had stabbed a few backs, schemed in the shadows, meticulously crafted suppression plans for every major clan, and spent a great deal of time researching forbidden techniques. But apart from all that, what else had he done to deserve such distrust? Had he really done anything that terrible? Had he? Frustration flared in his eyes. Lady Hyuga, are you certain you wish to settle this through force? Unless you're planning to kneel and bow to me, yes. Very well. Then forgive me for my offense. The 4th strongest in the Land of Fire? A joke. Senju Tobirama refused to believe in such nonsense. To him, the Tenseigan was nothing special. With his vast arsenal of secret techniques, he was confident he could claim victory. After all, not everyone was Kyosuke Uchiha. Someone who could simply crush him through sheer overwhelming force. Once I make my move, you shall be captured. Tobirama's hands came together in rapid succession. Chakra surged through his body as he took a deep breath. His cheeks bulged. Then he unleashed a torrential wave of water. Water style, great exploding water colliding wave. Towering columns of water rose over 10 meters high, and within moments, a flood surged outward, submerging the surrounding 2 kilometers. The sheer magnitude of the jutsu left the observing Hyuga clansmen stunned. They had always believed Tobirama to be nothing more than a schemer, relying on summoning, impure world reincarnation and borrowed techniques. But now, faced with the raw, overwhelming force of his chakra, they could only swallow in silent dread. You still wish to continue? Standing atop a massive water column, Tobirama nearly folded his arms in imitation of Madara, only stopping himself at the last second. Unlike Madara, he had no Susanoo to protect him. Leaving himself open like that would be foolish. He could only grumble internally. The wicked Uchiha always likes to posture. He muttered. Does this fool truly think this is enough to intimidate me? Yaoi shook her head. If not for Kyosuke's instructions, she would have taken this opportunity to end Tobirama's life right here and now. Just as she was about to make her move, a shadow suddenly flashed into the arena. Without hesitation, the newcomer lunged forward and delivered a flying kick straight at Tobirama. If you want to fight Yaoi, you'll have to get through me first. The voice rang out with unwavering resolve. The figure who had just arrived was none other than San. Chapter 205, Madly in Love. San Feng. Back then, after suffering defeat in the arena, San Feng took on the duty of protecting Hyuga Yaoi. And just like that, 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. What had begun as an obligation he reluctantly accepted had, over time, turned into something he could not abandon. Even if someone tried to drive him away. Even with Kyosuke's arrival, the man continued to avoid him,